Chapter 690, The Holy Land's Helplessness, the Shock and Sorrow of the Rogue Cultivators. It can be said that no matter what the Heavenly God Academy is planning, it will eventually clash with the Great Xia Empire. And as long as these supreme beings within their Forbidden Zone don't leave the Forbidden Zone, then neither the Heavenly God Academy nor the Great Xia Empire would ever wage war against them. Therefore, no matter how powerful the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire are, these top experts in their Forbidden Zones can be the ultimate victors. The other two, upon realizing this, also wore excited smiles. After all, based on their speculation, it is reasonable to deduce that there is definitely an earth-shattering battle between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire. At that time, these top experts in their restricted area can act as the hidden Orioles. Although we can play the role of the Oriole, we must guard against the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy no matter what. After all, they are not easy to deal with, given that they have such top experts. After a moment of silence, the old man slowly spoke again. Although they could indeed be the hidden predator, however, they now have to guard against the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire. After all, who knows if the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire might join forces to attack the top experts in their Forbidden Zone first. Although the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy have now become enemies. But those who have grown over millions or tens of millions of years naturally know that there are no eternal friends in this world, only eternal interests. In other words, if the interests between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire are strong enough, then the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy may join forces to fight against the top experts in their Forbidden Zone. This is not a situation that the top experts in their restricted area would want to see. However, if Chu Fan heard his words, he would definitely scoff. After all, no matter how bad the Great Xia Empire was, it was impossible for it to join forces with the Heavenly God Academy. Chu Fan even now desperately wants to destroy the entire Heavenly God Academy. So how could he possibly join forces with the Heavenly God Academy? No matter what, we must first find out the extent of the strength of that top expert in the Great Xia Empire, and at the same time see if he is a top expert from outside the universe. The shadowy figure then spoke silently, and after speaking, his gaze turned towards the direction of the Great Xia Empire. Of course, most importantly, his eyes also held a solemn expression at this moment. Perhaps the two top experts in the Forbidden Zones before him thought that the top expert of the Great Xia Empire had reached the true immortal realm. But he vaguely felt a surge of laughter. The strength of that top expert in the Xia Empire should not be at the true immortal realm, but rather at the legendary mortal immortal realm. However, because he was unsure, he did not reveal this message. After all, he didn't know whether this top expert of the Empire was a true immortal or a mortal immortal. Meanwhile, several powerful beings at the remnant immortal level within the Forbidden Zone were all paying close attention to the Great Xia Empire. At this moment, the Holy Land, which was still in shock, finally came to its senses. The eyes of these holy sites were filled with disbelief as they gazed toward the Great Xia Empire, because they never expected that there would be such a terrifying existence within the Great Xia Empire. That one from the Great Xia Empire must have been a legendary remnant immortal level expert. I didn't expect that this great battle would bring out two remnant immortal level experts. It seems that this universe is not as simple as we thought. One of the Holy Land's lords spoke with a touch of emotion in his eyes. After he finished speaking, his eyes were filled with worry, because he hadn't expected that both the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire possessed legendary powerhouses at the level of remnant immortal. If that's really the case, then how could their Holy Land possibly be a good place? Sai, we thought our Holy Land was the top power in the Central region, but we never expected that from today onwards, there will be another Great Xia Empire pressing down on us, and is the kind of existence that can completely destroy our Holy Land at any time. Of course, at this moment, one of the Holy Lords looked into the distance with a touch of emotion in his eyes and said. Some of the Holy Lords nodded in agreement after hearing what this Holy Lord said, because at this moment, they also understood that from this day forward, they were an affiliated Holy Land of the Great Xia Empire. Whether they agree or not, there will only be one outcome, although they knew that there were two top powers in the Central region above them. However, the former Batian Pavilion and Tianshan Academy rarely appear now. Therefore, these holy sites remain aloof and superior entities. However, the present Great Xia Empire does not have much in common with the former Batian Pavilion and Tianshan Academy. On the contrary, the current Great Xia Empire can suppress them. Therefore, the Holy Land has instantly fallen to the level of a first-rate power. Even so, they can only do nothing about it. After all they can do now is rage helplessly, and the Great Xia Empire must not find out. Just as the holy masters in these holy sites felt extremely helpless, the entire universe was plunged into shock. The two terrifying and destructive auras they had just encountered had instilled fear in them. They never imagined that the end of the world would be so close to them. The owners of those two terrifying auras are probably far beyond the Great Emperor realm. I never imagined that there would be such terrifying beings in our universe. No one expected that the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy would have experts above the level of Great Emperor. It seems that everyone has underestimated the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy. I wonder what realm these two top experts from the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy are at, and whether they have broken through to the legendary Immortal realm above the Great Emperor realm. Although it is unknown whether these two top experts have broken through to the Immortal realm, their current strength is definitely enough to crush experts at the Great Emperor realm. Isn't that obvious? If they couldn't suppress a powerhouse at the Great Emperor level, how could they possibly make the entire universe tremble? I originally thought that breaking through to the Great Sage realm would make me the most outstanding existence, but I didn't expect that I am still just an ant. Now, cultivators across the entire continent are discussing the cultivation levels of those two top experts. Some people speculate that they have entered the legendary realm of immortals. Some people also believe that their strength is only slightly above that of an emperor. Of course, now I'm more impressed with my own cultivation level. After all, many cultivators have already broken through to a very high level of cultivation. Of course, this is what they consider to be a very high level of understanding. They were somewhat saddened to discover that such a terrifying existence existed within the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy. After all, it instantly reduced them from powerful beings to mere ants. Such a disparity naturally saddened them. Chapter 691, The Great Xia Empire's Mass Breakthrough, Collective Tribulation. Of course, the Great Xia Empire paid no attention to the thoughts and the minds of these cultivators. After all, Chu Fan, who is currently hovering above Chang'an City of the Great Xia Empire, is constantly improving his strength, as the golden light and the auspicious golden dragon completely merged into his body. Chu Fan's overall strength has also fully entered the mid-stage of the Human Emperor realm. It should be noted that even the former Human Emperor Xian Yuan, upon breaking through to the Human Emperor realm, did not reach the mid-stage of the Human Emperor realm in an instant. This clearly demonstrates just how much Chu Fan's strength has improved. More importantly, Chu Fan, who was only at the mid-stage of the Human Emperor realm, possessed an aura that was in no way weaker than that of a powerful expert at the Great Emperor realm. In other words, he can now defeat even a powerhouse at the Great Earth Perfection realm. Just as Chu Fan's cultivation stabilized at the mid-stage of the Human Emperor realm, Xian Yuan Wu Dao and the others beside him were also extremely shocked, because the Great Emperor realm and the Human Emperor realm are both at the same level. Breaking through to a higher realm within this realm is not as simple as it seems. It could even be said that many powerful individuals spend hundreds of years to break through a minor realm. Moreover, those who broke through to the Great Emperor realm, even those who weren't particularly prodigious, sometimes took thousands of years to break through even a small realm. However, Chu Fan, standing before them, broke through another minor realm in less than a day. This instantly gave them an expression of disbelief. Of course, this is not the most important thing. Most importantly, Chu Fan's aura also became extremely terrifying. Moreover, as Chu Fan's cultivation level rose to the mid-stage of the Human Emperor realm, those related to him by blood or the top experts of the Great Xia Empire also began to gradually improve under this golden light. For example, the group of powerful figures from the Great Xia Empire surrounding Chu Fan. At this moment, the Emperor seemed to have realized something. He sat down cross-legged. A terrifying world law instantly emanated from his body. The next second, the terrifying laws of the world around him made his power incredibly strong. More importantly, his cultivation level, which was originally an unconventional path to enlightenment, has now directly entered the Great Emperor realm. More importantly, he did not attract the Great Emperor tribulation after entering the Great Emperor realm. Instead, he continued to sit cross-legged in the void, improving his strength. In the blink of an eye, the Emperor's strength reached the mid-stage of the Great Emperor realm. It should be noted that even the improvement speed of ordinary top-tier Emperor-level powerhouses is not as terrifying as his. Of course, the most important thing is that the Emperor's strength was originally the top among those who achieved enlightenment through alternative means, although his strength hadn't truly reached the Great Emperor realm at the beginning. However, at that time, his cultivation level could be considered as the mid-stage of the Great Emperor realm or even the late stage of the Great Emperor realm. This is why he directly entered the mid-stage after breaking through to the Great Emperor realm. More importantly, his combat power at the mid-stage of the Great Emperor realm far surpasses that of either mid-stage or late-stage Great Emperor realm experts. As the Emperor's strength increased, the auras of those around him also changed rapidly. For example, the Great Accomplished Holy Body and the Great Accomplished Overlord Body, who should not have been able to successfully enter the Great Emperor Realm, have now directly entered the Great Emperor Realm due to this terrifying power of fortune. However, after they entered the Great Emperor Realm, they did not directly enter the middle stage of the Great Emperor Realm like the Emperor. On the contrary, he continuously improved during the early stages of his reign as an emperor. The atmosphere in the sky grew increasingly terrifying. The auras of the individuals from the Great Xia Empire also rapidly increased. All the powerful individuals who achieved enlightenment through unconventional means began to advance their auras toward the Great Emperor Realm. Everyone who witnessed this scene was stunned. Even Xianyuan Wudao did not expect this scene to occur. It should be noted that even when the two great emperor-level powerhouses of their Xianyuan family lived in the same era, such a situation had never occurred. As the top experts of the Great Xia Empire around Chu Fan broke through to the Great Emperor Realm, thunderclaps resounded in the sky. These bolts of lightning seemed to threaten to destroy the world, enveloping everyone within them. It turns out that the thunderbolt from earlier did appear. Rather, it was because the Emperor's power was inherently formidable. Therefore, the thunderbolt just now did not take care of the Emperor. Now that the unconventional Dao-attaining powerhouses of the Great Xia Empire have all broken through to the Great Emperor Realm, the tribulation lightning in the sky has also appeared directly. As the lightning tribulation appeared in the sky, the Gun Emperor did not hesitate at all and took Chu Fan's body away. After all, Chu Fan has not yet awakened from his seclusion. Therefore, he can no longer be affected by the thunder in the sky. As for the powerful figures from the Great Xia Empire who had just broken through to the Great Emperor Realm, they were left behind to continue their breakthroughs. As time passed, the lightning that had been gathering in the sky finally fell directly down. They descended without discrimination towards the powerful figures of the Great Xia Empire who had broken through to the Great Emperor Realm below them in the sky. The Emperor's thunderbolts are obviously more terrifying. Then he paused slightly in his steps. The next second, he vanished from the world. Clearly, he did not intend to undergo his tribulation in the skies above Chang'an. Of course, besides him, the others also chose to undergo their tribulations in other places. As for the Sword Emperor and the Spear Emperor, they were protecting Chu Fan by his side. Meanwhile, the chaotic ancient emperor ventured into the depths of the universe, because he also needed to protect those in the Great Xia Empire who were undergoing tribulation. Therefore, the entire sky was shrouded in a terrifying shadow of thunder. While these emperor-level powerhouses of the Great Xia Empire were undergoing their tribulations. At this moment, golden starlight also appeared on the bodies of these top experts from Butian Pavilion and Xianyuan family. These golden starlight enhanced the power within their bodies. Although these golden starlight did not elevate their cultivation levels to the Great Emperor Realm, their strength has been greatly enhanced. They might even break through to the Great Emperor Realm because of these golden starlight. Thinking of the Patching Heaven Pavilion or the unconventional Dao-achieving experts of the Xianyuan family, their eyes were filled with excitement. After all, they were naturally very excited to be able to break through to the Great Emperor Realm. The strength of the alternative path to Enlightenment Realm is not much weaker than that of the Great Emperor Realm. However, there is a downside to alternative paths to enlightenment. Those who achieve this cannot become a first-generation or second-generation emperor. In that case, they would not be able to survive. They can only survive by relying on those longevity substances. After breaking through to become a first-generation emperor or a second-generation emperor, their life will be enhanced. A first-generation emperor can live for 100,000 years, while a second-generation emperor can live for 500,000 years. Therefore, who would want to break through to the Great Emperor Realm? Chapter 692, The Great Xia Empire's Immense Advancement. Chu Chen's Incredible Achievements. Therefore, it is naturally very happy for these people to break through to the Great Emperor Realm. Of course, they haven't truly broken through to the Great Emperor Realm yet. Breaking through to the Great Emperor Realm is also quite difficult. After all, the most difficult thing to deal with them is the thunder in the sky. However, none of this is a problem for them. Just as the eyes of these unconventional Dao-achieving experts from the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion were still filled with excitement, a golden light instantly surged into Fei Peng and the others inside the Time Pagoda. Fei Peng and the others, who were originally between the Quasi-Emperor Perfection Realm and the Great Emperor Realm, instantly raised their strength to a terrifying level. Without the slightest hesitation, they flew out of the Time Pagoda. Although they can directly enter the Great Emperor Realm without undergoing tribulation within the Time Pagoda. But they don't choose to do that now. After all, if such power accumulates to an excessive level, The tribulation they undergo after leaving the Time Pagoda will be even more terrifying. So they went directly to the depths of the universe to undergo their tribulation. In an instant, the thunder became extremely fierce again, and their auras were also terrifyingly enhanced. Of course, at this time, the top generals in the Great Xia Empire also received rapid promotions. For example, the aura emanating from Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu also became extremely fierce. After absorbing the golden light, their cultivation levels were greatly enhanced. Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu were the first to enter the late stage of Quasi-Emperor. It should be noted that at the beginning, both of them were still some distance away from the mid-stage of Quasi-Emperor. However, now, because of Chu Fan's breakthrough to the Human Emperor destiny, the aura of the Human Emperor instantly caused the two of them to break through to the late stage of Quasi-Emperor. Moreover, the auras of everyone else besides the two of them were also greatly enhanced. The strength of this group of generals has been terrifyingly enhanced. Li Yuanba and the others have also reached the late stage of Quasi-Emperor level. Of course, the most important thing is that the cultivation levels of the commanders of those armies have improved even more terrifyingly. For example, Chun Jibao directly advanced to the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm, even though his cultivation level wasn't very high at the beginning. Hua Zubing's cultivation level also reached the perfect Quasi-Emperor realm. Of course, General Meng Tian's strength has also been raised to the same Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm. As for Qin Xiong, Yu Fei, and others, their cultivation levels had risen to between the mid and late stages of the Transcendent Emperor realm. Even so, their cultivation level improved very quickly. Even Luo Cheng's strength has increased to the mid-stage of Quasi-Emperor. Chu Fan's breakthrough led to significant breakthroughs for all the generals in the Great Xia Empire. Even the entire Great Xia Empire experienced a tremendous boost. Of course, these promoted generals were indeed powerful. However, the most outstanding experts in the Great Xia Empire did not receive much improvement. For example, the Emperor Venerable of the Mortal Realm is still in the Mortal Realm. These omens of good fortune had little effect on him, unless Chu Fan can break through to the Red Dust Immortal Realm. In this way, Chu Fan's luck at the Mortal Immortal Realm would be able to elevate the Emperor's status. Even so, the Emperor Venerable can only advance one minor realm at most. Therefore, he is currently still quietly residing within the city of Chang'an in the Great Xia Empire. His gaze was calm as he looked toward the direction of the Heavenly God Academy, or the Forbidden Zone, because at this moment, he could sense the auras of the powerful beings at the remnant immortal level within the Heavenly God Academy and the Forbidden Zone. Of course, in addition to the promotions of the generals and commanders of the Great Xia Empire, the strength of others who had strong connections with Chu Fan also increased rapidly. Take Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran, for example. Although the cultivation levels of the two little ones were sealed by the Great Xia Empire, but the terrifying golden light also fell from the sky in an instant. Then it directly enveloped the two little ones. These two terrifying golden rays of light completely broke through the seals inside the two little ones' bodies. Then, in the blink of an eye, the two little ones' strength instantly reached the Saint King realm. It should be noted that the Saint King realm was once a top-tier existence in the Central region. After all, that Qingfeng Sword Saint was once a Saint King level existence. Even at the Saint King realm, he had already made a name for himself as the Qingfeng Sword Saint in the Central region. This shows that the Saint King realm is not simple. Emperor Hengyu frowned upon seeing the stand-ins on the two little ones, although he was very pleased that his princess and prince had advanced so quickly. However, as a powerful figure at the emperor level, how could he not understand that these improvements would not be of much benefit to the two little ones? For example, the great Emperor Wuxia was born with the cultivation level of a saint, but in the end, his cultivation level was still cut off by his father. If his cultivation level hadn't been severed, Emperor Wuxia might not have achieved his ultimate goal. Upon realizing this, Emperor Hengyu did not hesitate at all, and his terrifying aura directly sealed the auras of the two little ones. Of course, he also continuously infused the golden light into the bodies of the two little ones. Then they continuously improved the physical strength of the two little ones. This will also enhance the foundation of the two little ones. Therefore, the two little ones ultimately reached the Saint King realm. However, he was still at the sealed Saint King level. Although Emperor Hengyu wanted to eliminate the two little ones' cultivation levels. However, he could not possibly make a decision without informing his own emperor. Instead, they planned to wait until their emperor returned before making any further plans. After all, the two little ones in front of him were his princess and prince. Chu Chun, standing beside the two little ones, was completely dumbfounded. He never expected that his nephew and niece would surpass him in cultivation, and it reached such a terrifying level. So now his eyes are filled with disbelief. However, at that moment, he also felt a golden light continuously flowing into his body. Already an exceptionally talented individual, his aura rapidly increased after absorbing this terrifying golden light. Meanwhile, Chu Long, Chu Tianxiong, and the others beside him were also continuously enhanced by this golden aura. In just a few hours, the aura emanating from these people completely stopped. Chu Chen's cultivation level directly entered the Great Saint realm. Of course, besides him, Chu Long and Chu Tianxiong's cultivation levels were also at the Great Saint realm. As for Chu Fan's mother, she remained at the Saint King realm. Qing Yao and Luo Tianyi remained at the Great Sage realm. After all, they were imperial concubines of the Great Xia Empire, so the fortune they received was even greater. Chapter 693 Tianjizi breaks through to achieve Dao through an alternative approach, the prodigy Chu Wushuang. Feeling the terrifying power within his body, Chu Chen's eyes were filled with a look of bewilderment and disbelief. Clearly, he hadn't yet recovered from the terrifying power emanating from his body, because he never expected that he could reach the Great Sage realm in an instant. This was a level he never dared to even dream of before. But now he has broken through to this level so easily. Therefore, there was still a hint of dazedness in his eyes. Of course, Chu Long, Chu Tianxiong, and the others around them didn't care at all. After all, this kind of improvement wasn't the first time they'd experienced it. Now that they have reached the Great Sage realm, the wrinkles on Chu Long's face have completely disappeared. Even his beard fell off. He looks like he's entered middle age. Chu Tianxiong, on the other hand, appeared to have become even younger. She looks at least 10 years younger than she did at the beginning. Chu Long, still somewhat unaccustomed to it, touched his non-existent beard. Just as the strength of the group was improving, Tianjizi, who was standing beside them, was also undergoing a transformation. He was excitedly absorbing the golden starlight between heaven and earth. Then, without any surprise, he sat down cross-legged. Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran have now awakened from their recent enhancement. Both men looked at Chu Tianxiong and Chu Long with smiles on their faces. "Grandpa, how come you look so young?" Chu Yanran, even more curious, touched her head and looked at Chu Tianxiong, asking him a question. Then, like a curious child, she ran directly towards Chu Tianxiong. He stared at Chu Tianxiong with curiosity in his eyes. Chu Tianxiong burst into laughter upon seeing this. Without the slightest hesitation, he reached out and hugged Chu Yanran. "Ha! It must be because your father broke through to the legendary Great Emperor realm, so we also got promoted. Now your grandpa is a Great Sage level powerhouse." Then, Chu Tianxiong looked at Chu Yanran with a proud expression and said, "After speaking, I looked towards the central region with a hint of excitement in my eyes." He naturally guessed where such a terrifying improvement came from. After all, they could still feel the terrifying battle in the sky just now, even though they were far away. Moreover, they were extremely worried at that time. After all, they had seen figures belonging to their Great Xia Empire during the Great War. However, now that they have received such a terrifying boost, they know that the ultimate victor in this Great War will be their Great Xia Empire. So at this moment, he looked at his granddaughter with a hint of excitement in his eyes. As for Chu Wushuang, she slowly approached Chu Long's side with the demeanor of a little adult. However, you could see that he was also looking at Chu Long with curiosity in his eyes. Clearly, he was also very curious about Chu Long's ability to rejuvenate. Father has actually broken through to the legendary Great Emperor realm. I must also cultivate diligently so that I can help Father in the future. At the same time, he also strengthened his resolve to cultivate quickly, even though their cultivation levels were sealed. However, Chu Wushuang could still feel the terrifying fluctuations between heaven and earth just now, especially those last two terrifying auras. He could even sense that this universe was about to be completely destroyed. Thinking of this, he became even more determined to cultivate and help his father defeat these enemies. At this moment, Qing Yao slowly walked forward and looked at his son. Then, he gently straightened Chu Wushuang's collar before gazing into the distance with a touch of longing, because she also wanted to see Chu Fan. However, the family soon became happy and harmonious. Only Chu Chun remained somewhat bewildered. Even now, he never imagined that his younger brother, who used to follow behind him, would grow up to be this big. While the family was enjoying a harmonious time, the aura emanating from Tianjizi, who was standing nearby, suddenly became extremely terrifying. Then, he opened his eyes with a look of excitement in them. He smiled as he felt the terrifying power within his body. "Ha ha ha! I have finally broken the curse of our heavenly mystery pavilion and reached this realm." Then he couldn't help but laugh out loud, saying that the strongest among the top experts in their heavenly mystery pavilion was only at the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm. Perhaps because of the leak of heavenly secrets, none of the heavenly secrets disciples in the heavenly secrets pavilion can break through this realm. His cultivation has now broken through to this level, so he was naturally very excited. Grandpa Tianjizi, what realm have you broken through to? No sooner had he finished speaking than Chu Yinran's soft, sweet voice rang in his ear. Then Tianjizi couldn't care less about his excitement. Instead, he slowly stood up. Then he walked directly in the direction of Chu Yinran. There was also a hint of doting in his eyes. Clearly, he truly regarded Chu Yinran and Chu Wushuang as his own granddaughter and grandson. I have broken through the legendary alternative path to enlightenment. I never thought I would break through to this level one day. I have to thank the Emperor for this. Then he looked at Chu Yinran and spoke slowly. His eyes couldn't help but recall the time when he joined the Great Xia Empire. At that time, he was mainly drawn to the terrifying physique and luck of Chu Yinran and Chu Wushuang. I never expected that the Great Xia Empire, which I entered because of these two guys, would bring me such a terrifying boost. You know, if you rely on these two little guys to improve your strength, then he will have to wait at least 100 years. But now he has broken through to an alternative path of enlightenment. Breaking through to the Great Emperor realm probably won't be too difficult, because the training grounds of the Great Xia Empire far surpass those of other places. Congratulations, Grandpa Tianjizi. After hearing Tianjizi's words, Chu Wushuang slowly stood up and spoke to him. He was the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire, and also the only prince of the Great Xia Empire. Although everyone in the Great Xia Empire doted on him at this time, but the little guy was very serious. Most of the time, he would go to Zhuge Liang to learn how to govern the country. He would even seek out the top experts in Chang'an, the eastern region of the Great Xia Empire, to hone his martial arts skills. Of course, the martial arts that these generals are teaching him now are not the real top-level martial arts. Instead, he was taught simple, basic swordsmanship. Chu Wushuang is also incredibly powerful. In less than half a month, he mastered the basic swordsmanship to an incredibly high level. It's even more terrifying than the years of cultivation that many geniuses spend cultivating. Even Chu Chun had to admire him. Therefore, this peerless prince is a treasure to their entire Great Xia Empire. Chapter 694, The Excited Cultivator of the Great Xia Empire. Chu Fan meets the Emperor. Tianjizi burst into laughter after hearing Chu Wushuang's words. After all, he has finally broken through to this level. Although the realm of attaining enlightenment through alternative means is still a notch below the strength of the Great Emperor realm. However, he now also has the opportunity to break through to the Great Emperor realm. So now his eyes are naturally filled with excitement. Meanwhile, Chang'an was undergoing tremendous changes. Chang'an City in the eastern region was originally the true capital of the entire Great Xia Empire. Therefore, the golden starlight in the sky now shines directly over the entire city of Chang'an. As a result, the top cultivators in Chang'an City also began to gradually achieve breakthroughs. Even those cultivators whose cultivation levels weren't particularly high have now achieved significant breakthroughs. Everyone's abilities are making tremendous breakthroughs. Therefore, these cultivators are now looking into the distance with excitement in their eyes. After all, this isn't the first or second time they've broken through under these circumstances. Therefore, these cultivators now naturally understand why they were able to break through. Thinking of this, they looked excitedly at the sky above Chang'an. At the same time, their eyes showed not only excitement, but also admiration, because they knew that all of this was brought about by their own emperor. Only when their own emperor completely took control of the entire central region could their strength achieve such a terrifying breakthrough. And more importantly, they naturally knew about the great battle that had just taken place in the sky. Therefore, they now know that the ultimate victor in this great war will be their Great Xia Empire. Many cultivators who thought of this looked up at the golden light in the sky with admiration. As expected of the emperor, he is an unparalleled genius who came from the eastern region. He has probably already brought the entire universe under the control of the Great Xia Empire. An elderly cultivator at the saint level gazed into the distance with excitement and spoke. At the same time, you can see the intense excitement in his eyes, because the Great Xia Empire is now the most powerful entity in this universe. More importantly, the Great Xia Empire originated from the eastern regions, so they're naturally very excited. As soon as the old man finished speaking, the other cultivators began to discuss it amongst themselves. Yes, right now, our Great Xia Empire is probably the #1 power in the universe. Who would dare to provoke our Great Xia Empire? However, all of this is because of the Emperor. Without the Emperor, how could our Great Xia Empire have risen to this level? I just don't know where the Emperor is now. As the Emperor, he should be in the central region right now. I've heard that a city called Chang'an has been built in the central region. I really want to go and see what Chang'an in the central region is like. No matter what, this place was once the largest city of the Great Xia Empire. Their discussions were filled with gratitude, excitement, and curiosity as they gazed towards the central region, because they wanted to see how different Chang'an City in the central region was from their own Chang'an City. Of course, while these cultivators were discussing, other places also gazed towards the central region with a hint of admiration, because now, people in the 4 regions of the East, West, South, and North all have a great deal of admiration for this emperor of the Great Xia Empire. Meanwhile, at the same time that these cultivators in the Great Xia Empire were making rapid progress, at this moment, Chu Fan finally woke up from his breakthrough state. At this moment, his cultivation level had completely entered the mid-stage of the human emperor realm. In other words, he can now easily handle even a powerful figure at the level of a great emperor. It can be said that Chu Fan is at his peak right now, because even a mid-stage human emperor is no match for a first emperor. However, he was able to defeat a powerful figure who was once a great emperor. Therefore, his current strength is naturally not as weak as imagined. After completing the breakthrough, he nodded to the people around him without any hesitation. They then headed directly into the interior of Chang'an, the capital of the Great Xia Empire. Although he was breaking through, he was still aware of everything in the outside world. So now he wants to ask the emperor what exactly happened. At the same time, he also wanted to see just how strong that top expert from the Heavenly God Academy really was. After seeing their master leave, the Gun Emperor and Sword Emperor appeared in the sky without hesitation. After all, the top experts of the Great Xia Empire in the sky are still undergoing tribulation. Therefore, at this time, they naturally had to protect these top experts of the Great Xia Empire. Although they now know that the top experts in the Forbidden Zone and the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy dare not make a move. But what if? Therefore, they naturally did not choose to enter Chang'an City directly. Meanwhile, Chu Fan, after entering Chang'an City, headed directly into the city's interior. Soon, he appeared directly inside Chang'an City, and standing before him was the Emperor of the Mortal Realm, whom he had summoned. At this moment, he exuded a terrifying aura. His eyes held a calm gaze as he looked into the distance. However, upon seeing Chu Fan arrive, he still slowly bowed to Chu Fan. "Greetings, Your Majesty." He spoke to Chu Fan in a calm voice. After speaking, he slowly looked into the distance. The one who just made a move was the strongest expert from the Heavenly God Academy. After hearing his words, Chu Fan waved his hand at him, and then looked at Chu Fan and asked the Emperor. There was also a hint of curiosity in his eyes. I don't know if the one who just made a move was the strongest expert from the Heavenly God Academy, but the one who just made a move has reached the level of a remnant immortal. Although he has not truly entered the true immortal realm, his strength is about the same as that of a half-step true immortal. It would be easy for me to defeat him. The Emperor spoke calmly at this moment. After all, he had never been to the Heavenly God Academy, so he didn't know how strong the enemies were there. However, he was able to sense the aura of the person who had just made a move. Therefore, he also knew just how powerful the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy who had just made his move was. Although the one who just made a move was a remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy, his strength was enough to fight against an ordinary half-step true immortal. However, it was still too weak for him. After all, he had reached the first level of the mortal immortal realm. He wouldn't lose even if he fought against a true immortal at the second or third level. Chapter 695 Conversation with the Emperor, the Human Emperor's Grand Gift Package. Therefore, he naturally had no worries about that remnant immortal being from the Heavenly God Academy. Even for the Emperor, dealing with that crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy wouldn't require much effort. Thinking of this, his eyes naturally held a calm expression. It could even be said that the crippled immortal in the Heavenly God Academy posed no threat to him whatsoever. After hearing the Emperor's words, Chu Fan understood the strength of the top expert in the Heavenly God Academy. However, although the top-level expert from the Heavenly God Academy was merely a crippled immortal to the Emperor, he was the most powerful expert to him. After all, he is still far from being able to fight against a powerful expert at the level of a remnant immortal. Thinking of this, he shook his head. Although he didn't know if there were any other top experts in the Heavenly God Academy, Chu Fan finally breathed a sigh of relief after learning that the experts in the Heavenly God Academy were at the level of remnant immortals. After all, what the Heavenly God Academy has revealed this time should be their trump card. However, even so, he was only a powerhouse at the level of a remnant immortal. Therefore, the truly top experts in the Heavenly God Academy should not be particularly powerful. Or rather, there shouldn't be any beings at the level of a mortal immortal in the Heavenly God Academy. Thinking of this, he naturally breathed a sigh of relief. However, after my fight with this remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy, it also attracted the attention of those beings in the Forbidden Zone. This time, there were 3 remnant immortal-level beings emanating from the Forbidden Zone, so there are at least 3 remnant immortal-level beings in the Forbidden Zone. The emperor then leisurely turned his gaze towards the direction of the forbidden zone and spoke. After he finished speaking, a solemn expression remained on his face, because he could sense the strength of the three remnant immortals in the forbidden zone. Although those three remnant immortals were not the truly top-tier powerhouses in his eyes. However, if there are too many powerful beings at the remnant immortal level, then he will naturally have some problems dealing with them. Chu Fan's expression instantly turned serious upon hearing the emperor's words. At the same time, he instantly thought of the number of top experts in the Forbidden Zone. He had once heard Xian Yuan Wudao say that the strength of the top experts in the Forbidden Zone was not as simple as imagined. Otherwise, the Forbidden Zone would have been wiped out by true top experts long ago. Even the Xian Yuan Emperor of their Xian Yuan family wouldn't dare to actually take action against the Forbidden Zone. Otherwise, the enemy they would face would be one that even the Yellow Emperor could not defeat. Have those three remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone shown any signs of making a move? After thinking for a moment, Chu Fan directly asked the Emperor in front of him, his eyes filled with worry. According to the rules of this universe, the path to immortality should open in 100 years. Therefore, these three remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone should be waiting for the path to immortality to open. The Emperor then slowly stepped forward and spoke, his face showing a calm expression, because he could sense that the true path to immortality was about to open. At that time, the powerful figures within these restricted areas should make their move. However, all of that will not happen for another 100 years. So he naturally has no worries now. Chu Fan breathed a sigh of relief after hearing the Emperor's words. If that's really the case, then their Great Xia Empire doesn't need to fear the so-called remnant immortal-level powerhouse in the Forbidden Zone. After all, over the course of a century, the strength of these top experts in their Great Xia Empire had naturally improved rapidly. It's worth noting that he also possesses the Time Pagoda. While 100 years might pass in the outside world, 10,000 years could pass within his Time Pagoda. In other words, they still have 10,000 years to cultivate before they reach the path to immortality. If Chu Fan were to cultivate to the peak of the Human Emperor realm, it would take him at least several thousand years. Therefore, based on the calculations of the path to immortality, Chu Fan can at most become a second-generation Human Emperor. Thinking of this, a serious expression returned to his face. If he wanted to fight a true powerhouse at the level of a remnant immortal, therefore, his strength would need to break through to at least the level of an 8th or 9th Human Emperor. However, having reached that level, he was also very close to the realm of the immortal of the mortal world. Thinking of this, Chu Fan immediately turned his gaze to his system space. The system also gave him a reward when he broke through to the Human Emperor realm. However, he was undergoing tribulation at that time, so he did not look into the system space. Now that he has successfully overcome the tribulation, he is naturally looking forward to the rewards that the system space will give him. He then saw the Emperor's gift pack. The Human Emperor's gift pack, lying in the system space, is the gift pack he received after overcoming the Human Emperor tribulation and becoming a powerful being at the Human Emperor realm. He then nodded to the Emperor and disappeared. After all, the Emperor is still by his side, so naturally he won't properly open the Human Emperor's gift package. Soon, Chu Fan returned directly to his palace. Upon returning to the palace, he immediately opened his Emperor's gift pack. At the same time, he looked at the Emperor's gift pack with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. He was clearly expecting the Emperor's gift pack to bring him the majority of the upgrades. The Emperor's gift pack has been successfully opened. Congratulations, host. You have successfully obtained 3 random summoning cards, 1-time tower upgrade card, 2 army summoning cards, and 1 10,000-year cultivation card. As soon as Chu Fan successfully opened the Human Emperor's gift pack, the rewards for this gift pack quickly came into view. The first reward is a random summon card. The handling of summoning cards is naturally very clear. After all, he had already used quite a few summoning cards. The second reward is an upgrade card for the Time Tower. With this Time Pagoda upgrade card, he can upgrade the Time Pagoda. In other words, the Time Pagoda will successfully upgrade to a higher level after this upgrade card is used successfully. The Time Pagoda's function will be enhanced at that time. The current time flow rate inside the Time Pagoda is 100 times faster than outside. However, after using this Time Pagoda upgrade card, the flow rate inside the Time Pagoda becomes 1,000 times faster than outside. In this way, what happens in the outside world in the vastness of time would be 100,000 years. It was enough for the Great Xia Empire, or rather for Chu Fan. After all, he had a chance to break through to the so-called immortal realm in the mortal world over 100,000 years. Of course, this was his own idea. After all, once you reach the Great Emperor realm, it becomes increasingly difficult to break through to the next realm. For example, Xian Yuan Wudao only broke through to the level of a 3-generation emperor after hundreds of thousands of years. Chapter 696 Upgrade of the Time Pagoda, the enhancement brought by the 10,000-year cultivation card. So, 100,000 years may be a long time for others. For ordinary cultivators, 10,000 years is an unimaginable time. However, for beings like Xianyuan Wudao, who have broken through to become several generations of emperors, this amount of time is not even enough. The next reward in the Emperor's gift pack is 2 army summoning cards. Although Chu Fan doesn't yet know what characters these 2 army summoning cards will summon. But for him, it's probably just as good a summoning card. But what surprised him even more was the last reward, because the final reward was actually a 10,000-year cultivation card. You should know that the 10,000 years of cultivation card is the most important thing to him right now. With this 10,000-year cultivation card, his strength would be greatly enhanced. Chu Fan firmly believed that as long as he had 10,000 years, he would definitely be able to break through to become a first-generation or second-generation human emperor, because his breakthrough was not as difficult as those of Xianyuan Wudao and others. Therefore, Chu Fan naturally believed that he could break through to a higher realm with 10,000 years of time. Without hesitation, he took out the 10,000 years cultivation card. Then he directly grasped the 10,000-year cultivation card in his hand. The 10,000 years of cultivation card is a golden card. At the same time, a terrifying aura emanated from above. Chu Fan looked at the 10,000-year cultivation card in his hand with excitement in his eyes. System, help me conceal the truth. However, when Chu Fan used this cultivation card, he also planned to have the system help him conceal the truth. After all, if his cultivation level improved rapidly and the top experts inside or the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy found out, these people would definitely be very curious. Even powerful beings at the level of Remnant Immortal might come out to investigate the situation of the Great Xia Empire. At that time, a real battle between powerful beings at the level of a Remnant Immortal might actually occur. Moreover, after the system concealed the secrets of heaven, Chu Fan did not intend to break through directly in Chang'an City, because he still wanted to break through inside the Time Pagoda. After all, even a true immortal level expert couldn't see through his double protection. However, just as he was about to enter the Time Tower and begin his cultivation, he remembered the Time Tower upgrade card he had obtained from the Emperor's gift pack. Thinking of this, he immediately took out the upgrade card for the Time Pagoda. Then, another card, radiating terrifying time power, appeared in his other hand. More importantly, this card is now stirring with desire. It's as if it's automatically upgrading the Time Pagoda. All right, I'll upgrade you right away. Seeing this, Chu Fan gently comforted the Time Pagoda's upgrade card, then silently recited something to the system space. System, use the Time Tower upgrade card to upgrade the Time Tower. As soon as he finished speaking, the upgrade card for the Time Pagoda disappeared from his hand. At the same time, a terrifying power enveloped the Time Pagoda. The pagoda was rapidly upgraded in the next second. The original 100 times the operating time instantly became 1,000 times the operating time. More importantly, as the flow of time increased, the spiritual energy within the Time Pagoda also received a significant boost. If one cannot break through to the true immortal realm outside, then there might be an opportunity to break through to the true immortal realm within the Time Pagoda. The laws governing time or other laws within the Time Pagoda are all very well developed. Therefore, it will be easier for them to break through to the true immortal realm. Now that the upgrade is complete, I should go to the Time Tower to improve my strength. Seeing that the Time Pagoda had been upgraded, Chu Fan was also eager to try it out. Without hesitation, he entered the Time Pagoda. Then I found a seat at the very top of the Time Pagoda. The next second, he turned his bright eyes to the 10,000-year cultivation card in his right hand. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he crushed the 10,000-year cultivation card. The next second, a terrifying force directly entered his body. As this terrifying power entered his body, Chu Fan felt a terrifying force constantly being injected into his body. More importantly, the Golden Emperor's law instantly enveloped his body. He, who had only just grasped the human emperor's law, began to slowly comprehend its true meaning. Of course, most importantly, his aura was rapidly enhanced at this moment. In just a short while, the power within his body surged in like a flood. Then his cultivation level directly increased from the mid-stage of the Human Emperor realm to the mid-stage of the Human Emperor realm. Keep in mind that he has just survived a tribulation, and anyone who saw this scene would find it absolutely unbelievable. However, this is not the end of the story. The cultivation level that had been stuck for 10,000 years was being completely integrated into Chu Fan's body by the terrifying Human Emperor law. Moreover, with the time-stabilizing power of the Time Pagoda, increasing the flow rate by 1,000-fold. Chu Fan's physical strength was also constantly increasing. As the power within Chu Fan's body continued to increase, the Time Pagoda seemed to have found its direction as well. Terrifying spiritual power was continuously being injected into Chu Fan's body, while Chu Fan was constantly absorbing the power brought by this 10,000-year cultivation card. Half a year passed within the Time Pagoda, and Chu Fan's cultivation level had completely reached the perfect human emperor realm. Having entered this realm, Chu Fan has reached the pinnacle of the human emperor realm. However, even after reaching the peak of the human emperor realm, Chu Fan had not yet fully used up his 10,000-year cultivation card, since he was currently cultivating inside the Time Tower. Therefore, not all of the current 10,000-year cultivation cards have been used up. As the power within the 10,000 years cultivation card continued to flow into Chu Fan's body, Chu Fan's body was also undergoing tremendous changes at this time. The golden phoenix on his forehead also emitted a low humming sound at this moment. At the same time, the golden light on the phoenix began to slowly dissipate. This made the entire phoenix seem as if it were about to wither away. Chu Fan's aura also became lifeless. Even the golden aura emanating from him began to slowly fade. Instead, an aura of death filled the air. Moreover, his face had become haggard. The long black hair behind her gradually turned white. His facial expression also began to slowly show signs of aging. At that moment, he sat cross-legged on the ground like an old man about to be buried. Even so, he is still constantly absorbing the spiritual energy around him. Chapter 6, 97, A Terrifying Transformation, the Second Human Emperor Realm. Although he now has a full head of white hair and many wrinkles on his body. However, one could sense that there was still a life force within Chu Fan's body constantly restoring his health. Of course, besides that, the deathly aura emanating from his body was becoming increasingly terrifying. At this moment, he was not much different from an old man who was about to be buried. Even so, his aura has become extremely terrifying. As time passed, Chu Fan's body began to undergo tremendous changes. The most important point is that Chu Fan's body is now slowly starting to deteriorate. Soon only a silvery white skeleton remained. Even so, a fiery red light was constantly flickering in the very center of this silver white skeleton. Moreover, the fiery red light began to turn into a pale gold. As the light slowly turned golden, it instantly spread throughout the entire skeleton. Then, the aura emanating from the skeleton began to slowly increase. The next second, the silvery white bones began to slowly fade into a pale gold. As the silvery white bones slowly turned into a pale gold, the pale golden light emanating from the bones was becoming increasingly terrifying, until finally, it turned into a golden skeleton. As the golden skeleton slowly took shape, a phoenix began to slowly circle above it. Although this phoenix was very agile, the aura emanating from it was still quite terrifying. Without the slightest hesitation, the phoenix pounced directly into the skeleton's body. The next second, the golden skeleton began to slowly grow flesh and blood. Golden flesh instantly and completely enveloped the golden skeleton. As these golden flesh and blood continued to grow wildly, a golden light instantly enveloped the golden skeleton. As time passed, the golden figure reappeared in the Time Pagoda. More importantly, a faint glow emanated from the golden figure. As golden blood continued to flow through Chu Fan's body, Chu Fan's aura also began to become extremely terrifying. He now seemed like a true immortal or demon standing between heaven and earth. More importantly, the golden power within his body was constantly filling his body. Chu Fan's golden hair was also very flowing. However, as time passed, the golden light on Chu Fan's body transformed into the golden human emperor law. Then, Chu Fan's golden hair on his back slowly turned into black hair. His aura had completely entered another world. This allowed him to reach an even higher level of mastery once again. He has now reached the level of a first-generation emperor. In other words, in a short period of time, his cultivation level successfully reached the realm of a first-generation human emperor. It should be noted that at this level, his strength is no weaker than that of Xianyuan Wudao. Even so, Chu Fan's aura had not completely dissipated. On the contrary, the terrifying aura emanating from him continued to grow. Instantly, his aura became extremely terrifying. Moreover, the human emperor's law continues unabated. As a continuous stream of power was being poured into his body, Chu Fan felt that the power within him was becoming terrifying. As time passed, Chu Fan felt himself once again facing a life-or-death crisis. At the same time, the golden light emanating from his body slowly dissipated. Instead, a lifeless atmosphere prevailed. Moreover, his entire body seemed to be enveloped in a ball of fiery red light. As the light enveloped him, the golden light instantly enveloped his entire body. More importantly, this golden light seemed to be endless. Then his body began to undergo drastic changes. In just a moment, the golden light completely burned away his flesh and blood. In an instant, only a golden skeleton remained. However, this time the golden skeleton did indeed become quite terrifying. More importantly, the golden skeleton also transformed into streaks of golden starlight and disappeared into the world. Where Chu Fan had just stood, only a ball of golden flame remained. Within this golden flame, there are also glimmers of life. As the golden flames continuously absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the golden light emanating from the golden flames grew increasingly terrifying. As time passed, the golden light emanating from the flames began to slowly emit a terrifying aura. Then a giant golden egg appeared in the spot where the kitchen had just been. And this giant golden egg is constantly absorbing external energy. Soon, terrifying laws of the human emperor emanated from the golden egg. The next second, the golden egg shell began to slowly crack. Instead, it was Chu Fan who appeared. At this moment, the phoenix on his forehead was flapping its wings continuously. At the same time, the terrifying power within his body seemed capable of completely expanding this world. Of course, most importantly, the aura of the human emperor's law within his body had now filled the entire time pagoda. At this moment, the life force within his body also received a significant boost. Most importantly, he had already reached the level of a second emperor. Keep in mind that he had just survived his tribulation and was only at the mid-stage of the human emperor realm. But now he has become the second emperor in such a short time. Chu Fan's current strength far surpasses that of Xian Yuan Wu Dao and the chaotic ancient emperor. Although the strength of a typical second-generation emperor is roughly the same as that of a third-generation emperor. However, Chu Fan's strength far surpasses that of an ordinary human emperor. Therefore, his current strength is comparable to that of a powerful figure at the level of a fourth-generation emperor. As his aura reached that of the second human emperor, Chu Fan's aura completely stopped increasing. Clearly, he had completely absorbed the cultivation card from before. More importantly, thanks to this cultivation card, he successfully survived 2 terrifying crises and reached the level of a second-generation human emperor. Just moments ago, Chu Fan thought that with this cultivation card, he could only advance to the level of a first-generation human emperor. However, his current cultivation level far exceeded his expectations. Chapter 698 Using Summoning Cards, the 7th Emperor, Tianyuan Emperor. After successfully breaking through to the second human emperor realm, Chu Fan slowly opened his eyes. At the same time, 2 terrifying golden lights emanated from his eyes. These 2 terrifying golden rays of light seemed capable of completely destroying all the power in the world. And the aura emanating from him was much more terrifying than it had been at the beginning. The sharp, terrifying golden aura in his eyes was slowly withdrawn. Then Chu Fan felt the terrifying power within his body. A hint of joy instantly appeared in his eyes. I never imagined that I could successfully break through to the level of a second-generation human emperor with just this cultivation card. It seems that this cultivation card is not as simple as I thought. Then he couldn't help but sigh, and after speaking, he looked at the system with a hint of joy in his eyes. This improvement far exceeded his expectations. However, Chu Fan could guess why he had been able to improve so much this time. Aside from his cultivation card, there is mostly spiritual energy from the time pagoda. Otherwise, even with his cultivation card, he wouldn't have been able to raise his strength to this level. As he thought of this, the light in his eyes slowly faded. Then he leisurely turned his gaze to the other rewards in this Emperor's gift pack. Now that his cultivation level has already reached this point, so now he should also use the other rewards in the Emperor's gift pack. After all, his strength has already increased so drastically. Naturally, other rewards should be used as well. There are currently 2 rewards remaining in the Emperor's gift pack. The same reward is 3 summon cards. These 3 summoning cards are not Earth summoning cards, but rather unlimited summoning cards. In other words, these 3 summoning cards could summon either an Emperor-level powerhouse or an Immortal-level powerhouse. Of course, it is also possible to summon an even lower-level being. The second item is 2 army summoning cards. Army summoning cards are no longer particularly important to Chu Fan. After all, the Great Xia Empire has now successfully unified the entire universe. If an army is needed, these commanders of the Great Xia Empire can train troops. After all, every commander is a top-notch individual. It will be very easy for them to train an army. So he immediately turned his attention to the 3 summoning cards. Now, he actually hopes that these 3 exchange cards can summon 3 top-tier powerhouses. After all, there are 3 remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone alone. Moreover, this is a remnant immortal-level being exposed within the Forbidden Zone. Therefore, Chu Fan now hopes that the Empire can have more top-tier experts. Thinking of this, he looked expectantly at the 3 summoning cards in his system space. Without any hesitation, he took out the 3 summoning cards from the system space. System, use these 3 summoning cards directly. At the same time, he did not hesitate at all and planned to use these 3 summoning cards directly. After all, he was really looking forward to these 3 summoning cards. As soon as he finished speaking, the 3 summoning cards transformed into 3 beams of light and appeared in the system space. More importantly, the aura emanating from these 3 beams of light was also extremely terrifying. Then, the first summoning card slowly opened in the system space. As the summoning card began to slowly rotate in the system space, its color changed from white to blue. More importantly, the blue light on this summoning card didn't linger for long before turning purple. Then, even within the purple light, numerous golden hues appeared. Over time, this summon card became a golden summon card. Upon seeing this, Chu Fan knew that everything was in the bag. Any character summoned by a golden summoning card will have a power level that far exceeds one's own. This means that the character summoned this time must be at least at the level of a 4th-generation emperor. This kind of existence is considered quite good even in the entire Great Xia Empire. Moreover, one can cultivate for 100,000 years inside the Time Pagoda. In other words, on the path to immortality 100 years from now, the person I summon should be able to reach the level of an 8th or 9th incarnation of a great emperor. Ding! Congratulations, host! You have successfully summoned the emperor-level figure, Emperor Tianyuan. Then the system's voice directly entered Chu Fan's mind. Chu Fan was somewhat surprised after hearing the system's voice, because he had never heard of the name of the Heavenly Emperor. However, the Heavenly Emperor who was given the title of Great Emperor should not be too weak. Therefore, Chu Fan directly opened the introduction about this Emperor Tianyuan. It turns out that this Emperor Tianyuan was a top-tier powerhouse in the universe. Moreover, in that universe, he was even known as the Heavenly Emperor. Therefore, he could be considered the chosen one of that universe. More importantly, this Emperor Tianyuan's strength reached the level of a 7th-generation emperor. It should be noted that this level of strength is the most powerful in the entire Great Xia Empire, second only to the emperor. After all, the current emperor of the Great Xia Empire is a being at the level of a mortal immortal. Therefore, as long as he doesn't summon a being of the red dust immortal level, he is the most outstanding being in the Great Xia Empire. Moreover, Emperor Tianyuan perished in his own universe after battling 7 powerful beings of the same realm as himself, all at the same level as emperors. Most importantly, before his demise, he severely injured all of these emperor-level powerhouses. 4 emperors were seriously injured, and 3 emperors perished. This shows that Emperor Tianyuan is among the top beings in the same realm. Of course, more importantly, the strength of the Heavenly Emperor was also terrifying. Therefore, the summoned Tianyuan Emperor may grow into a 9th-generation emperor or a true immortal during this period. Thinking of this, Chu Fan's face instantly lit up with excitement. At first, he thought the summoned character wasn't particularly powerful, but I never expected that the summoned character would be so terrifying. This can be said to have added another layer of depth to the Great Xia Empire. A century later, on the path to immortality, the Great Xia Empire had another being capable of battling against beings at the level of a remnant immortal. It can even withstand the attacks of powerful beings at the level of a remnant immortal. Therefore, Chu Fan was naturally very satisfied with the Heavenly Emperor he had summoned this time. He then turned his attention to the second summon card. Even the first summon card was more surprising than this. Will the second summoning card bring him surprise? Thinking this, he looked at the second summoning card with anticipation in his eyes. Chapter 699, The True Immortal Kunpeng, the Shadow of the 7 Great Emperors. Under Chu Fan's expectant gaze, the summoning card slowly appeared. More importantly, this summon card did not slowly change from blue to purple and then to gold like the previous summon card. This summon card actually turned gold. More importantly, his golden light was extremely dazzling. It was as terrifying as Chu Fan's destiny as an emperor. As the golden light filled the entire system space, the golden light within the system's space slowly dissipated. Then a golden Kunpeng appeared in the system space. This golden Kunpeng exuded a terrifying aura. It seemed as if it could completely overwhelm all the heavens. However, the moment the golden Kunpeng appeared, an expression of excitement appeared on Chu Fan's face, because he could clearly sense that the aura emanating from this golden Kunpeng was at least at the true immortal level. In other words, the strength of the powerful being he summoned this time is not much different from the strength of the emperor he summoned last time. It's even possible that the Kunpeng he summons is stronger than the emperor. At the same time, the origin of this golden Kunpeng is also explained on this golden summoning card. Kunpeng, one of the 10 ancient ferocious beasts. Upon seeing this introduction, Chu Fan instantly understood where the Kunpeng he had summoned came from. This is one of the 10 ancient fiends in that world. More importantly, once the Kunpeng reaches adulthood, it can fight against a powerhouse at the level of a celestial king. Although this Kunpeng has not yet reached true adulthood, its strength has reached the realm of true immortal. It can be said that each of the 10 ancient fiends in that world was an extremely top-tier existence. Moreover, Kunpengzi once went head-to-head with a powerful immortal king in that great battle between immortal kings. Although he ultimately paid the price of his demise, he was still someone who had fought head-on against a celestial king-level powerhouse. The Kunpeng summoned this time was the offspring of the former Kunpengzi. Of course, most importantly, Chu Fan also saw that this Kunpeng's strength had reached the 4th level of true immortal. In other words, this Kunpeng's strength surpasses that of the Emperor, although the Emperor's mortal immortal realm is higher than the true immortal realm. However, no matter what, the Emperor is only at the 1st level of the mortal realm. This Kunpeng, however, has reached the 4th level of true immortal. Therefore, his strength is naturally a notch above that of the Emperor. Upon thinking of this, Chu Fan's eyes instantly lit up with excitement, because he hadn't expected the Kunpeng he summoned this time to be so terrifyingly powerful. This also further enhanced the foundation of the Great Xia Empire. In an instant, the number of true immortals in the Great Xia Empire increased by 1. Of course, if we include the Emperor, a mortal immortal, then the Great Xia Empire now has 2 immortal-level powerhouses. Moreover, each and every one of them is an extremely outstanding individual. Chu Fan's excitement was undisguised as he thought of this. Then he looked at the last summon card with even more anticipation. After all, the Kunpeng that has been summoned is already so powerful. The Heavenly Emperor, summoned by the first summoning card alone, was quite powerful, so he was naturally very much looking forward to the 3rd summoning card. He wondered if the character he summoned with his 3rd summoning card would be as good as the previous 2. In Chu Fan's commentary, the 3rd summon card slowly turned purple. Seeing this, Chu Fan knew that the 3rd summon card was probably inferior to the 2nd summon card. However, he did not feel regret. Instead, he stared intently at the 3rd summon card. However, soon after, black light appeared on the 3rd summon card. Chu Fan was completely stunned when he saw this, because he has never actually summoned a summoner that turns a summoning card black. Thinking about this, he looked at the summoning card with great confusion. However, it soon turned into a completely black summon card. Chu Fan was very puzzled when he saw this scene, but at this moment, he was also staring intently at the summoning card. This was the first time he had ever seen a black summoning card, so he was also curious about what kind of beings the black summoning card summoned. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have successfully summoned the Emperor-level character, Shadow. At the same time, the system's voice rang in Chu Fan's mind. The next second, a black figure appeared on the black summoning card. More importantly, the black figure exuded a terrifying aura. He was like a master hiding in the shadows. It was as if it were the ruler of darkness, watching over all the heavens and myriad worlds. Upon witnessing this scene, Chu Fan hurriedly opened the introduction about Shadow. He then instantly saw Shadow's current cultivation level. The Shadow summoned this time has the same cultivation level as the Heavenly Emperor at the level of a 7th Emperor. However, Shadow cultivates the law of Shadow, so in a head-on confrontation, he might not be a match for Emperor Tianyuan. However, in terms of assassination, he would definitely surpass Emperor Tianyuan. Even if Emperor Tianyuan is not paying attention, he could still assassinate him. More importantly, the Shadow Emperor can also hide in the shadows of others. Even a powerful expert at the true immortal level might not be able to tell. As for those stronger than the true immortal realm, they cannot truly see through it. They couldn't even detect the shadows within their own shadows. This is what makes Shadow so monstrous. Chu Fan was also somewhat surprised to see this. At the same time, he was also curious whether, if the Shadow remained hidden in a shadow, he would have a powerful bodyguard who was almost at the level of a true immortal. It should be known that the Shadow can assassinate beings who are at the same level as themselves. He could even assassinate someone who is 1 or 2 levels above him. So as long as others don't pay attention, he can stay hidden in Chu Fan's shadow. Thinking of this, Chu Fan finally smiled again. After all, he never takes the most elite experts of the Great Xia Empire with him when he goes out. Therefore, the current Shadow is precisely the solution to this problem. Shadow's skill level is even higher than that of other top players. If Chu Fan wanted to go fishing, then he would leave the Great Xia Empire alone. At that time, all that's needed is for Shadow to follow in his shadow. As for the 2 top experts of the Great Xia Empire, they can naturally come to support them in a short time. Thinking of this, Chu Fan couldn't wait to see the 3 top experts he had summoned this time. Chapter 700 Army Summoning, the Emperor's Imperial Guard and the Divine Demon Iron Cavalry. Without hesitation, Chu Fan summoned the 3 top experts he had just summoned into the Time Tower. The moment the Emperor summoned these 3 masters, he sensed their aura. The aura emanating from Kunpeng, in particular, shocked the Emperor. At the same time, he also understood that the Great Xia Empire had gained another top-tier figure. After Chu Fan summoned Kunpeng and the other 2 top experts, he only had 2 army summoning cards left in his Human Emperor gift pack. Although Chu Fan didn't have high expectations for these 2 army summoning cards. However, he also planned to use these 2 army summoning cards directly. After all, the army summoning card wasn't very useful to him. But perhaps we can give him some hope. Thinking of this, Chu Fan turned his attention to the 2 remaining army summoning cards in the system space. Without any hesitation, he directly activated the 2 army summoning cards through the system. Then, the 2 army summoning cards began to rotate continuously within the system space. The next second, the light on the first army summoning card also radiated a terrifying power. Then, this army slowly appeared in front of Chu Fan. Ding! Army summoning card successfully used. Congratulations, host, you have successfully obtained the Emperor's Imperial Guard. Upon hearing the system's voice, Chu Fan's face instantly showed a hint of surprise. Because the army he summoned this time was different from the armies he had summoned before. These soldiers were all dressed in golden armor. Of course, the most important thing is that this army is not particularly large in number. It only reached 10,000 people. Such a number is naturally very small within the current army of the Great Xia Empire. However, this still left Chu Fan with an excited expression on his face, because at this point he discovered that the number of this army was not particularly large. However, this army was composed of powerful individuals at the Great Sage level or above. In other words, even the weakest soldier in this army is at the Great Sage level. Most importantly, the commander of this army was a figure comparable to the 3 great emperors. Both of the deputy generals also reached the level of a first-generation emperor. The 10 squad leaders even reached the level of emperors. There are also hundreds of quasi-emperors. After learning about the strength of this army, Chu Fan was completely shocked, because he hadn't expected this army to be so terrifying. He then directly opened the introduction of this army. It turns out that this army was the Human Emperor's Imperial Guard, created by the Human Emperor at some unknown time. It was the Human Emperor's army that once swept across the heavens alongside a powerful Human Emperor. That's why this army is so terrifyingly powerful. There's so many powerful figures at the Emperor level alone. It can be said that this army greatly improved Chu Fan's abilities. With this army guarding Chang'an, the city will become very safe. After all, having such a terrifying army would be a huge boost for Chang'an City or the Great Xia Empire. More importantly, the number of Emperor-level powerhouses and other powerful individuals summoned by this army is also enormous. Therefore, this summon is no weaker than the summoning cards of several Emperor-level powerhouses. Although Chu Pai currently possesses a summoning card for an Emperor-level expert, the weakest Emperor-level expert he can summon is still at the level of a second Emperor. However, he was also unable to summon so many Emperor-level beings at once. Thinking of this, Chu Fan looked at the second army summoning card with even greater excitement. If the first army summoning card can summon such a terrifying army, then can the second army summoning card summon an even more terrifying being? Thinking of this, Chu Fan looked at the second summoning card with anticipation in his eyes. At the same time, the second summon card is slowly emerging. Ding! Congratulations, host! You have successfully summoned the Divine Demon Iron Cavalry. At the same time, the system's voice rang in Chu Fan's mind. Then, an army exuding a terrifying aura of gods and demons appeared before Chu Fan. More importantly, the aura emanating from this army was extremely terrifying. Of course, the most important thing is that this army only has a force of 1,000 men. What's truly terrifying is that every single soldier in this army has reached the quasi-emperor level. In other words, all members of this 1,000-strong Divine Demon Iron Cavalry unit had reached the quasi-emperor realm. Among them are 10 experts at the Great Emperor level. Meanwhile, the 2 deputy commanders of this army had also reached the level of the second emperor. The commander of the Divine Demon Iron Cavalry even reached the level of a 4th-generation emperor. Moreover, this army was formed by the former God-Demon Emperor, who gathered the geniuses from all the heavens and myriad realms. Therefore, all the soldiers in this Divine Demon Iron Cavalry are top-tier talents. This includes many royal and imperial styles. In this universe, physical constitutions are divided into mortal, spiritual, royal, imperial, and holy constitutions. The physical constitutions in this army are also at the top level. Of course, there are other top-tier physical constitutions besides these. For example, the Supreme Bone and Double Pupils are considered top-tier physiques. Of course, there are also the legendary Divine Bodies and Immortal Bodies. There is not much difference between the Divine Body and the Holy Body. Many sacred bodies are even stronger than divine bodies. Of course, the physical body is far beyond the scope of the divine body. For example, the supreme immortal body or the flying immortal body. Putting aside these top-tier physical attributes, every soldier in this army possesses the most outstanding physical qualities. After all, even in the universe where Chu Fan is currently located, there are not many geniuses who possess a true holy body. This is why Chu Qian was able to become the holy son of a holy land after possessing the supreme bone. After all, there isn't a significant difference between the supreme bone and the holy body. Even the supreme bone surpasses many sacred bodies. And among this army of gods and demons, there is one who possesses a sacred body. The commander of that divine demon iron cavalry possessed the legendary divine demon physique. The divine demon body is also known as the divine demon holy body. It was only because it resembled both a god and a demon that the word holy in its sacred body was removed. Even so, he is still considered a sacred body. Therefore, the divine demon iron cavalry that Chu Fan summoned this time successfully became the first army of the Great Xia Empire. Even the newly summoned Emperor's Guard is no match for the divine demon iron cavalry. It can be said that the shock these two armies gave Chu Fan was too strong. At first, he thought the army he summoned was one of those armies from the long history of the world. However, unexpectedly, the armies summoned were actually created by the top experts from all the worlds. Chapter 701 The Great Emperor's Legacy appears in the sea, and the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land is excited. It can be said that the Emperor's gift package you receive this time will greatly enhance the entire Great Xia Empire. Chu Fan has even become so arrogant that he wants to challenge the top experts in the Forbidden Zone. Of course, his elation only lasted for a moment before it dissipated. After all, there are only 100 years left until we reach the path to immortality. In the next 100 years, their Great Xia Empire needs to improve rapidly. Only in this way can we prepare for the path to immortality that lies ahead. Moreover, Chu Fan felt that the path to immortality was not as simple as he had imagined. As someone who had transmigrated from another world, he naturally knew that the characters he summoned could all reach the true immortal realm and the mortal immortal realm. This means that there exists another vast world above this universe. Or perhaps there exists a celestial realm above this universe. So 100 years from now, they will probably face the legendary immortal realm. Thinking of this, Chu Fan's face naturally showed a hint of urgency. He wanted to improve his skills quickly. At the same time, they also wanted to quickly enhance the strength of the Great Xia Empire. Only in this way can we face the difficulties ahead. Chu Fan then directly ordered the Great Xia Empire's army to bring over everyone who was far away in Chang'an City in the eastern region. After all, he has now re-established Chang'an City in the central region. Therefore, it is natural that one's own father and family members should also be mentioned here. Therefore, a portion of the Imperial Guard of the Great Xia Empire then headed directly to Chang'an City in the eastern region of the Great Xia Empire. They directly took Chu Wushuang and the others to Chang'an City in the central region. After Chu Wushuang and the others were taken to Chang'an City in the central region, Chu Fan also began to make arrangement for the changes to the entire Great Xia Empire. After all, the next generation of the Great Xia Empire has already unified the entire universe. Moreover, it's become an unstoppable force. Therefore, the entire Great Xia Empire naturally needs to be reorganized. The Holy Lands, seeing the actions of the Great Xia Empire, naturally offered no resistance whatsoever. After all, the Great Xia Empire is no longer something they can resist. If they resist, they will be met with suppression. So in just a few months, the entire universe completely fell under the control of the Great Xia Empire. Of course, the entire universe was already part of the Great Xia Empire's territory from the very beginning. However, the Great Xia Empire at that time did not take such strong measures as it does now, after the Great Xia Empire successfully unified the entire universe. The fortune of this universe is also constantly being poured into Chu Fan's body. This caused the phoenix on Chu Fan's forehead to continuously strengthen. His overall strength has also improved rapidly. The auspicious golden dragon also hovered over Chang'an City. Of course, only the Emperor and Kunpeng were able to see the golden dragon of fortune. As for the others, they were unable to clearly see the golden dragon of fortune. As for Chu Fan, a top-tier expert, he could naturally see the existence of the golden dragon of fortune. After all, he originally possessed the legendary destiny of a human emperor. After spending a year in Chang'an with Chu Wushuang and the others, Chu Fan went into seclusion in the Time Pagoda. For him, rapidly improving his own strength is the most important thing. Therefore, Chu Fan spent the rest of his time in seclusion inside the Time Pagoda. Of course, after several years of seclusion, he will naturally choose to emerge. This went on for over a decade. During this period, the entire Great Xia Empire was managed by top talents summoned by Zhao Gao Luo Wang and others. They truly deserve to be renowned figures in the history of the Great Xia Dynasty. The Great Xia Empire was managed by them in a very orderly and efficient manner. The current Great Xia Empire is many times stronger than the Great Xia Empire of the past. Moreover, this is because of the existence of the Time Pagoda. Therefore, the strength of these top experts in the Great Xia Empire has also improved rapidly. While these top experts of the Great Xia Empire were still improving their strength in the Time Tower, at this time, on a sea area hundreds of millions of miles away from Chang'an City of the Great Xia Empire, a terrifying silvery white light fell from the sky. As the silvery white light descended from sky, the entire world seemed to tremble for a moment. All the powerful figures instantly turned their gazes toward the direction from which the silvery white light had fallen. As the silvery white light slowly dissipated, a terrifying aura emanated from the spot where the silvery white light fell. It was as if a real emperor was emanating his aura from there. At this moment, the Heavenly Sword Holy Land is located near this sea area. The Heavenly Sword Holy Land is one of the top holy lands in this universe. The Holy Land also contains beings at the quasi-emperor level. The current Holy Lord is in existence who has reached the perfect state of a great sage. The Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land looked towards this sea area with a look of shock in his eyes. This means that the legacy of an emperor has appeared. But why would the legacy of an emperor-level expert appear at this time? Then, the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land spoke with an incredulous look in his eyes. As a powerful expert at the Great Saint Perfection Realm, he could naturally sense the source of this terrifying aura with ease. At the same time, he now guessed what the terrifying fluctuations beneath that silvery white light represented. However, he was clearly more excited at this moment, because if there were any inheritances from powerful emperors, then their Heavenly Sword Holy Land would be the closest, and it would be much easier for them to obtain those inheritances. Summon the holy sons and daughters of the Holy Land. Without hesitation, the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land issued the order. As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared directly in the main hall of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land. He gazed out of the main hall with a calm, yet excited look in his eyes. Then, several young people instantly entered the main hall. The aura emanating from these young people was extremely terrifying. Two of them even possessed an aura that reached the saintly realm. As for the other three, their auras were at the true king level. However, it is quite easy for them to reach higher levels at their age. We pay homage to the Holy Lord. These young talents bowed respectfully to the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land above. There was a hint of excitement in his eyes. The Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land waved his hand at these people. Then he slowly spoke. The inheritance of a great emperor-level expert has appeared in the sea. However, the inheritance of a great emperor-level expert can usually only be entered by the younger generation of geniuses. Therefore, I hope that this time you can enter the inheritance left by the great emperor-level expert and obtain the inheritance of the great emperor-level expert. Without the slightest hesitation, the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land directly expressed his thoughts. Generally, when a powerful figure's lineage emerges, they will choose these top geniuses to inherit their legacy. This is why the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land chose to summon the Holy Son and Holy Daughter of his own Holy Land. Chapter 702 An Era of Prodigies, the Young Supreme Chu Fan. Upon hearing the words of the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, the faces of all the holy sons and holy daughters of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land present instantly showed an excited expression. In particular, a golden light appeared in the eyes of the two holy sons and daughters who had reached the sainthood realm. Master, I wonder what the limitations are in this emperor's inheritance. The young man slowly stepped forward and asked the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land a question, his eyes filled with excitement. After all, the legacy of a powerful emperor is still very useful to them. After all, their Heavenly Sword Holy Land has only ever produced one great emperor-level expert. The woman beside him looked up at the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land with a curious expression. We haven't yet found out exactly what the restrictions are on the inheritance of the great emperor-level experts, but according to my guess, this time only young geniuses like you can enter the inheritance of the great emperor-level experts, so you should be able to obtain the inheritance of the great emperor-level experts. After hearing the young man's words, the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land spoke slowly. As the Holy Lord of a Holy Land, he naturally sent people to inquire about the inheritance of powerful figures at the emperor level while summoning the holy sons and daughters of these holy lands. So now all he needs to do is wait for news of the succession. Yunlong, you are the one in the history of our Heavenly Sword Holy Land whose talent is closest to that of the Heavenly Sword Emperor of our Heavenly Sword Holy Land. Therefore, you do not need to go to this inheritance ceremony, because you can accept the inheritance of the Heavenly Sword Emperor of our Heavenly Sword Holy Land. Then, the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land looked at the Holy Son of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land with a worried expression and spoke. The saintly son of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, who has reached the saint level, is none other than Jian Yunlong of the Heavenly Realm Holy Land, and also the disciple of the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land. More importantly, Jian Yunlong's talent is terrifying. He possesses the legendary innate sword bone. As long as he obtains the inheritance of the Heavenly Sword Emperor of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, breaking through to the Emperor realm should not be particularly difficult for him. That's why the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land wanted him not to participate in this earthly inheritance. Master, if I am afraid to even enter the secret realm of the great Emperor's inheritance, then even if I obtain the inheritance of the Heavenly Sword Ancestor, I will not be able to truly achieve the great Emperor realm. The great Emperor realm requires being invincible among the contemporary geniuses. Therefore, Yunlong plans to defeat all the contemporary geniuses in the secret realm to obtain the final great Emperor's inheritance. After hearing his master's words, Jian Yunlong stood up confidently and spoke. Possessing innate sword bones, he has never been defeated in the entire Heavenly Sword Holy Land. Even Yun Qingsheng, the Holy Maiden of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land who also possesses a top-tier physique, was defeated by him. This is the source of his pride and confidence. Alas, although your talent is indeed terrifying, this era is in its golden age, and there are many true geniuses. Dao Fan of the Dao sect alone has already shown strength that has reached the saint realm, and he also possesses innate Dao bones, which are not much different from your innate sword bones. Moreover, there is Zhu Wuqing from the demon sect, who is said to be not far from the Saint King realm. In addition, Jun Wangdao from the Broken Wind Holy Land seems to be not far from the Saint King realm either. The Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land sighed and spoke slowly. At the same time, he slowly recounted the names of the most outstanding talents of this era. This era truly deserves to be called the Golden Age. The number of exceptional talents in this era alone was enormous. In the past, only a few individuals with exceptional physical attributes would appear once every tens of thousands of years, but this era has seen many of them. For example, Dao Lin, who possesses the innate Dao bone, Long Zhan Tian, who has the Battle Saint body, and the Demon Prince of the Heartless sect with the Ancient Demon body, etc. It can be said that the strength of the geniuses of this era far surpasses that of the previous era. Although they are all very talented, I believe that I am no less talented than them. After hearing his master's words, Jian Yunlong replied with a serious expression, and it could be felt that the power in his body had reached the perfect state of sainthood. Such a level of cultivation is indeed rare among the younger generation. Even now, most of the prodigies who have emerged are only at the saint realm or the true king realm. Actually, what I'm worried about isn't them, because their talent and strength shouldn't be too far behind yours. What I'm really worried about is the Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire. The sect leader of the Heavenly Sword sect sighed silently after hearing Jian Yunlong's words. Then he slowly spoke again. As he spoke, a hint of worry and fear appeared in his eyes. After all, in this universe, the only things that can truly frighten their holy land are probably the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family. Is Master worried about Xianyuan Qingtsong from the Xianyuan family? Although it is said that his strength has reached the Saint King realm, I still firmly believe that I am no weaker than him. Upon hearing the words of the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, Jian Yunlong immediately gazed leisurely into the distance. At the same time, a terrifying fighting spirit instantly emanated from his body. The terrifying sword aura emanating from him instantly enveloped the surroundings. This made the entire hall extremely terrifying. The Holy Maiden of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land beside him also felt this terrifying pressure and took a step back. Several holy sons who had not reached the sainthood realm beside him were sent flying backwards. The Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land was somewhat helpless upon witnessing this scene. However, he simply waved his hand and completely obliterated the terrifying pressure. Then, with a complex look in his eyes, he slowly spoke. Xianyuan Qingtsong of the Xianyuan family has indeed reached the Saint King realm, but I am most worried about Chu Chun, the young supreme of the Great Xia Empire. It is said that his strength has reached the Great Saint realm, and he is also the elder brother of the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire. So it is he who I am worried about. At the same time, he spoke with a complex look in his eyes. During this period, Chu Chen's name spread throughout the entire continent. Moreover, He is an unparalleled genius who possesses the supreme bone. Every move he made was an absolute crushing defeat of the prodigies. Therefore, he was given the title a Supreme Young Master. It should be known that the young Supreme Being's future strength will definitely reach the level of achieving enlightenment in an unconventional way. This is why he was called the Young Supreme. More importantly, Chu Chen's most important asset is his identity. He was the elder brother of a human emperor of the Great Xia Empire. This is why everyone values him so much. Even a holy land like the Heavenly Sword Holy Land wouldn't dare to truly provoke Chu Chen. Chapter 703 The Pressure of the Young Supreme Chu Chen, the Young Great Emperor, War God Body, War Venerable. Upon hearing the words of the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, Jian Yunlong's eyes lit up instantly. If it were someone else, Jian Yunlong would still be qualified to challenge them. However, Jian Yunlong was indeed not qualified to challenge this young Supreme Being. After all, the last time this young Supreme Being was mentioned, he had defeated a veteran expert at the Great Sage level. This clearly demonstrates the extent to which Chu Chen, the young Supreme Being of the Great Xia Empire, has reached. The Great Xia Empire should have no shortage of Emperor-level successors, so this young Supreme should not participate in this secret realm competition, right? The woman standing next to Jian Yunlong then slowly stepped forward and spoke. After she finished speaking, a glint of light still shone in her eyes. As the Holy Maiden of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, although her strength was slightly inferior to that of Jian Yunlong. But no matter what, he is still a genius who has reached the saint level. Therefore, her strength is naturally not weak. More importantly, she is also the disciple of the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, so she is naturally qualified to ask such a question. The Great Xia Empire is indeed not lacking in the succession of emperors, but this young Supreme Being will surely not miss such a good opportunity for training. After hearing the woman's words, the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land sighed softly. The whole world understands that the Great Xia Empire has no shortage of a legacy of powerful emperors. After all, the Great Xia Empire has so many emperor-level powerhouses, so they naturally have no shortage of the inheritance of emperor-level powerhouses. However, Chu Chen can indeed come here to gain experience. The Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land was afraid that his holy son would encounter this young Supreme and have his Tao heart shattered. In that case, the great emperor-level powerhouse that the Heavenly Sword Holy Land was about to produce would perish. As the Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, and also Jian Yunlong's master, he naturally did not want to see such a thing happen. Whether this young Supreme Being comes or not, I must enter the earthly secret realm this time. After hearing his master's words, Jian Yunlong slowly spoke, his eyes filled with determination. The Holy Lord of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land shook his head helplessly after hearing Jian Yunlong's words. Finally, seeing the determination in his apprentice's eyes, he could only nod helplessly. After all, one cannot allow one's own disciple's Tao heart to be shattered. Since Jian Yunlong is going to participate in this Emperor's secret realm, he naturally won't stop him. Although the Heavenly Sword Holy Land was the closest to the location where the Great Emperor's secret realm appeared, the news of its appearance could not be kept secret from the other Holy Lands. For example, the Tao sect, which is not particularly far from the Heavenly Sword Holy Land, also received news about the Great Emperor's secret realm. Therefore, the Tao sect directly dispatched their top disciples, including the prodigy with the innate Dao bone in their sect. Of course, the Tao sect also knew about the young Supreme Being of the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, while sending out this prodigy with innate Dao bones, the Tao sect also instructed him about the young Supreme Being of the Great Xia Empire. At the same time, the demonic sect also received this news. A young man from the Heartless sect, exuding a terrifying aura, also gazed leisurely towards the overseas direction. At the same time, there was a hint of shrewdness in his eyes. The aura emanating from his entire being had already reached the saintly realm. More importantly, the aura emanating from him was only one step away from the Saint King realm. At the same time, several top geniuses slowly emerged from the Temple of War. As one of the top powers in this world, the War God Temple naturally has many outstanding talents among its members. For example, at this moment, the War God, who possesses the War God Body, looked into the distance with a hint of fighting spirit in his eyes. The aura emanating from the young man beside him was also quite strong. I never expected to encounter the Emperor's legacy so soon after we emerged from seclusion. It seems that this Emperor's legacy is destined for our War God Temple. One of the young men looked excitedly towards the overseas direction and spoke, while one could sense that his aura had reached the saintly realm. That's right, this time the inheritance of the earth is definitely our War God Temples. Who among the geniuses of the entire world is a match for His Highness, the Holy Sun? Another prodigy, standing beside him, slowly stepped forward and spoke, and it could be sensed that his cultivation level had also reached the saintly realm. The pride in his eyes was completely undisguised. It was as if he were the most powerful genius in the world. I wonder if I'll be able to meet that so-called young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire this time. If I do, then I'll let him know the strength of the young emperor of my war god temple. A woman beside them chuckled softly, and after speaking, she looked gently toward the war god. Upon hearing the woman's words, the war god exuded a terrifying fighting spirit. He was the most talented person in the entire Temple of War. At the same time, his cultivation level has now reached the late stage of Saint King. It should be noted that the strength of the so-called true top geniuses in the world today is only at the Saint King realm. Moreover, these are all just speculations from others. After all, no one knows whether they have actually broken through to the Saint King realm. However, this war venerable has truly broken through to the late stage of Saint King. More importantly, he also possesses the legendary god of war body. Therefore, he was confident that his strength was enough to defeat an ordinary great sage. This young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire is not weak, so he should be able to withstand a few moves from His Highness, the Holy Sun. The young man who had just spoken slowly turned around and looked at the war venerable. To them, the title of Young Supreme was not particularly terrifying. More importantly, the war venerables had already defeated beings at the Great Sage level, so they naturally had no fear of this young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire. Of course, more importantly, their holy son was known as the Young Emperor. Therefore, they concluded that their own holy son was stronger than that young supreme being. Of course, Chu Chun was once hailed as the Young Emperor. However, because he possesses the supreme bone, he is called the Young Supreme. Upon hearing his supporters' words, the war god's face instantly broke into a smile. At the same time, he looked expectantly in the direction of the Great Xia Empire. He also wanted to see just how strong this so-called young prodigy really was. The whole world knows that Chu Chun is the supreme young master. They also knew that he had defeated a veteran master of the Great Sage level. But no one knows the true extent of his cultivation. Chapter 704, Chu Chun heading to the sea, Young Chu Wushuang. While the geniuses of the entire continent were all turning their attention toward the direction of the great emperor's inheritance. At this moment, in a sea area, a young man dressed in a black robe was leisurely walking in the air above the sea. At this moment, he exuded a very peaceful aura. More importantly, the aura emanating from him was not particularly strong. However, it was as if there was an invisible staircase above the sea, constantly supporting him as he slowly moved forward. More importantly, although the sea beasts below all knew about the young man in black above, they were trembling with fear and were hiding further and further away. The young man smiled slightly upon seeing this. Then, a mysterious light instantly emanated from his body. The next second, he appeared directly on an island. At this moment, the gentle aura emanating from him slowly dissipated. He gazed into the distance with a glimmer of light in his eyes. A terrifying aura was constantly emanating from his gaze. An emperor-level inheritance? I wonder if I can actually obtain this emperor-level inheritance this time, and whether these so-called geniuses will choose to emerge at this moment. Then, he gazed intently in the direction from which the terrifying aura emanated, muttering to himself, a hint of anticipation in his eyes. He clearly hopes that a rival will emerge. But Wushuang will probably come out this time too, since he is probably no weaker than my royal uncle now. Soon, the young man leisurely turned his gaze towards the direction of Chang'an City, and then said with a hint of anticipation in his eyes. This young man in black was none other than Chu Chun, the young supreme being in the eyes of all the geniuses. During this period, he did not stay in Chang'an to cultivate, because as long as you have Chu Fan's permission, you can enter the Time Tower from anywhere. So during this time, he was traveling all over the continent. This is why he has such great power and reputation. He has now reached the Great Sage Realm. It was clear from the aura emanating from him that his Great Sage Realm was not as simple as one might imagine. But his attainment was not simply a matter of reaching the Great Sage Realm. He also cultivated the Supreme Bone to its highest level. At the same time, the terrifying aura of destruction emanating from his body seemed to freeze the surroundings completely. Because he had been traveling on the mainland during this period, this is why she was given the title of Young Supreme. This is also the origin of his title of Supreme Youth. Of course, besides this young supreme being, he also has a powerful figure who has achieved enlightenment in a different way protecting him. Chu Fan didn't want his older brother to perish while he was out training. Just as Chu Chun finished speaking, he headed directly towards the Great Emperor's secret realm. After all, he also wanted to see just how far this so-called Great Emperor's inheritance had come. Just as this young supreme being was heading towards the Great Emperor's inheritance, A young man in a white robe with gold trim in Chang'an City also leisurely raised his head. He exuded a terrifying aura. He sat cross-legged between heaven and earth like a sun. Beside him stood a middle-aged man with his body outlined, looking at the young man with a respectful gaze. The aura emanating from the boy had clearly reached the great sage realm. Meanwhile, faint sounds of dragon roars could be heard behind the boy. Lord Zhao, I don't know what changes have occurred in the world that have made me feel so oppressed. Then the boy spoke softly to the middle-aged man beside him, his eyes filled with curiosity. Your Highness, an emperor's legacy has appeared in the sea, which is why there is an aura of power from an emperor-level expert in this world. Upon hearing the boy's words, the middle-aged man quickly spoke to him, and the respect in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest after he finished speaking. An emperor-level inheritance? How interesting that an emperor-level inheritance has actually emerged. The boy looked surprised after hearing the middle-aged man's words, and then he slowly turned his gaze towards the sea. In that case, I'll go and see this emperor's inheritance. After all, cultivating the palace is quite boring. The boy then spoke again in a low voice, his eyes filled with curiosity. If your highness wishes to go, you should first consult the emperor. However, there are many emperor-level successors in our great Xia Empire, so why should your highness do it personally? The middle-aged man was somewhat surprised after hearing the boy's words, but he still cupped his hands in greeting to the boy. Clearly, the middle-aged man wasn't particularly optimistic about the inheritance at the emperor level. I'll go to find my father right away. Although the succession of emperors is quite common in our great Xia Empire, it is time for me, a prince of the great Xia Empire, to go out and let the world see what it's like. After hearing the middle-aged man's words, the young man spoke again slowly, and as he spoke, a terrifying aura emanated from him. Then, like the blazing sun, he headed towards another main hall. Soon, the boy arrived deep inside the palace. The young man, having arrived deep within the palace, gently pushed open the gate of the Jinbei prince's mansion. At this moment, the Jinbei prince's mansion was filled with laughter and joy. However, with the arrival of the young man, the laughter and chatter in the Jinbei prince's mansion gradually turned towards him. Wu Shuang is here. You come to Grandpa's place. It's been almost a month since I last saw you. How was your seclusion this time? Just as the young man entered the Jinbei prince's mansion, a middle-aged man's voice slowly drifted over. Then, the former prince of Jinbei, Chu Tianxiong, leisurely waved to the young man. Wu Shuang greets grandfather. The young man then stepped forward and bowed to everyone present in turn. The young man was none other than Chu Wu Shuang of the Great Xia Empire, who was also the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. Over the course of more than a decade, he has grown from a child into an unparalleled prodigy. He had already reached the Great Sage realm before he even reached adulthood. This is all because Chu Fan severed all of his cultivation when he returned. Otherwise, he would probably have already reached the quasi-emperor realm. Even so, his strength at the Great Sage realm was still terrifying. Brother Wu Shuang. Just as Chu Wu Shuang finished speaking, a little boy quickly ran up to him. Then she threw herself into his arms. Chapter 705, The Little Demon King, with double pupils, Chu Wendao, and Chu Wu Shuang's resoluteness. The little guy was wearing a silver-white robe, and his face looked rosy. At the same time, her little hands also looked pink and tender. Of course, more importantly, it seems that a terrifying power is being sealed inside the little guy's body. If the seal is broken, the power within the little guy's body will likely become extremely terrifying. What's even more terrifying is the terrifying power emanating from the little guy's eyes. Even ordinary people dare not look the little guy in the eye. Ask that you should listen to your grandfather during this time. Chu Wu Shuang held the little one in her arms and asked him gently, her eyes filled with doting affection. I have been listening to my grandfather's words during this time, but my father has not yet come out of seclusion, so I have not been able to see him. After hearing Chu Wu Shuang's words, the little guy also raised his chubby little hands and said something that made everyone present burst into laughter. Even the girl who had been sitting very seriously to the side had a smile on her face at this moment, and the aura emanating from her body had reached the great sage realm. However, her aura was only fleeting. This little guy has become a little devil in the whole of Chang'an City by relying on your name as the emperor. Now all the little guys in Chang'an City are afraid of him. At this moment, Chu Tianxiong slowly walked forward and looked at Chu Wu Shuang, saying, however, when he talked about this, he also showed a hint of doting affection for the little guy. After hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, the little guy became angry and refused to pay any attention to him. Your father hopes you can attain immortality through the Tao, so you should listen to your grandfather and father from now on. After hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, Chu Wu Shuang sighed and gently patted the head of the little guy in her arms. The little guy nodded after hearing Chu Wu Shuang's words. Upon hearing Chu Wu Shuang's words, Chu Long laughed and stepped forward. As long as you, my elder brother, and your father are there, that's enough for me. I only hope that you can grow up happily." After saying that, Chu Long waved to the little guy. The little guy quickly ran to him. This little fellow is none other than Chu Fan's third son, Chu Wendao. When he was born, the entire sky became very dark. However, two terrifying beams of light soon shot out from the sky, completely shattering the darkness. The others then discovered that Chu Wendao possessed the legendary double pupils. Therefore, the entire Great Xia Empire was very happy at that time. Chu Fan, who was in seclusion, even gave the little guy the name Chu Wendao, hoping that he could ask the Dao and become an immortal. Of course, these are all just other people's guesses. Chu Fan's expectations were not just that simple. However, this little guy has been greatly favored by the Great Xia Empire since birth. It's fair to say that everyone dotes on the little guy. After all, the ultimate position in the Great Xia Empire belongs to Prince Chu Wushuang. Therefore, they naturally doted on this little guy. What's more, the little guy also has such a terrifying physique. Even Chu Wushuang doted on her younger brother. This is why Chu Wendao developed the physique of a little demon king. He beat up all the noble young men in Chang'an who were about his age. And even after being beaten up, he didn't dare to complain. After all, everyone knows that Chu Wushuang dotes on her younger brother. Therefore, they naturally dared not complain to Chu Wushuang. So, they had no choice but to report the matter to Chu Tianxiong. Chu Tianxiong only symbolically punished Chu Wendao each time. So it's not a big deal for the little guy. After being punished, they all ran to Chu Wushuang's side. Then he went out to play with Chu Wushuang. As he played, he forgot about the punishment he had been given. This also gave him the potential to become a little devil. Chu Wushuang smiled after hearing Chu Long's words. It doesn't matter to him how far his younger brother grows up in the future. As the older brother, he will naturally provide for him. Moreover, he couldn't believe that his younger brother, with such a terrifying physique, couldn't grow up. For example, Chu Yanran's strength has now reached the Great Sage realm. What brings Wushuang to us this time? At this moment, Qing Yao slowly stepped forward and said, as Chu Wushuang's mother, he naturally knew Chu Wushuang's temperament very well. Therefore, she was now somewhat puzzled as to why Chu Wushuang had come looking for them. After all, Chu Wushuang is usually very busy. After all, Chu Fan had essentially handed over the entire Great Xia Empire to them, leaving it to rot. Although most of the time Zhuge Liang and others were helping Chu Wushuang handle affairs. However, this nominal eldest prince still needs to handle some government affairs. Therefore, he was the busiest member of the Chu family in the Great Xia Empire. I've heard that an emperor's legacy has appeared in the sea, so I want to go there to see this so-called emperor's legacy. After hearing Qing Yao's words, Chu Wushuang cupped his hands in greeting to Qing Yao before slowly revealing his purpose. The Great Emperor's inheritance. I never expected that the Great Emperor's inheritance would appear in the sea. However, if you want the Great Emperor's inheritance, you can just go to the experts of our Great Xia Empire. Their strength has not reached the Great Emperor realm. Chu Tianxiong was somewhat surprised after hearing Chu Wushuang's words. He hadn't expected that the inheritance of a powerful emperor would appear in the sea. However, he was somewhat puzzled at this moment. After all, if Chu Wushuang really wanted the inheritance of a great emperor-level expert, he only needed to ask the top experts of the Great Xia Empire for it. After all, the Great Xia Empire had a great many emperor-level powerhouses. Their lineages probably surpass even the so-called lineages of the great emperors. Moreover, Chu Tianxiong also knew that there were some powerful figures at the level of emperors in the Great Xia Empire who were probably far beyond their imagination. Therefore, he felt that Chu Wushuang did not need to go to that sea area. The others nodded silently after hearing Chu Tianxiong's words. To them, Chu Wushuang's actions were tantamount to taking the long way around. Only Chu Yanran's eyes showed a glimmer of light. Although there are many powerful emperors in our Great Xia Empire, and the inheritances they leave behind are even greater than this emperor's inheritance, Wushuang has been in Chang'an for so long and wants to go out and see the world, and also let the world know that the offspring of the human emperor are the most outstanding geniuses in the world. After hearing Chu Tianxiong's words, Chu Wushuang spoke with a serious expression, and at the end, he exuded a terrifying aura. Of course, his terrifying aura was not directed at the people present. After all, his father was the emperor of this era. Therefore, he naturally could not tarnish his father's reputation. Chapter 706 The Methods Left Behind by Chu Fan, the Great Perfection Holy Body of the Protector. After hearing Chu Wushuang's words, Chu Yanran, who was not far away from him, also emitted the same aura. His eyes were filled with longing. Although Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran are both geniuses at the Great Sage level, however, the two of them had been cultivating within the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, not many people know about them. Of course, Many top powers outside the country also know that the Great Xia Empire has princes and princesses. However, outsiders are unaware of the extent of the power of this prince and princess of the Great Xia Empire. That's why Chu Wushuang and Chu Yanran are now thinking about going to the outside world. Chu Qianxiong was taken aback when he heard Chu Wushuang's words, and then he slowly looked into the distance. At the same time, he seemed to see the former Chu Fan in Chu Wushuang, even though this trip might be dangerous. However, Chu Tianxiong knew he could not stop Chu Wushuang. Then he let out a helpless sigh. Since Wushuang wants to go, then let him go. He must demonstrate the might of our Great Xia Empire. Chu Long then leisurely stepped forward and addressed Chu Wushuang. After speaking, his eyes gleamed with golden light as he gazed into the distance. After all, the Great Xia Empire is now the most powerful force in this universe. Therefore, he believed that Chu Wushuang would not have any major problems after leaving. More importantly, the Great Xia Empire has emperor-level powerhouses who can protect Chu Wushuang. Unless it is a truly top-tier powerhouse who makes a move, Chu Wushuang will not be threatened. If Wushuang wants to go, then go. But before you go, explain the situation to Senior Emperor. Your father is currently in seclusion, so if you want to go out, you should ask Senior Emperor first. At this moment, the Bluebird also stepped forward leisurely and said, although the Bluebird had already successfully broken through to the level of alternative enlightenment. However, she is not as clever as she used to be. Instead, she looked at Chu Wushuang with a gentle expression. After hearing Qing Yao's words, Chu Wushuang cupped his hands in greeting to Qing Yao and then headed into the depths of the Great Xia Empire without any hesitation. Deep within Chang'an City stood a magnificent palace. Of course, this magnificent palace is located within the royal palace. Most importantly, this place is home to the most powerful figures in Chang'an City, which is also the Great Xia Empire. They were all protecting the Great Xia Empire or the city of Chang'an. Each powerful individual who goes into the Time Tower for secluded cultivation will wait for other powerful individuals to complete their secluded cultivation before going into the Time Tower for secluded cultivation again. After Chu Wushuang arrived outside the palace gates, she felt an extremely terrifying aura emanating from within. However, this aura only lingered on him for a moment before completely dissipating. In the end, Chu Wushuang pushed open the door without any hesitation. Then he slowly walked in. As Chu Wushuang slowly walked in, he saw the figures of these top experts inside the palace. At this moment, many figures were sitting cross-legged inside the palace. Moreover, the aura emanating from each of these figures was extremely terrifying. Among them were prominent figures, such as the Emperor's great accomplished holy body. Of course, the one at the very top is still that Emperor. At this time, his cultivation level was only at the first level of the mortal-immortal realm. However, the aura emanating from him became extremely terrifying. He even became completely inexplicable, as if he didn't exist in this world. Greetings, Your Highness. The Emperor and others also awoke from their seclusion at this time, although it could be said that they were never in seclusion in the first place. After all, their cultivation had just broken through, so they were not currently in a state of seclusion. Greetings, esteemed seniors. Upon hearing their words, Chu Wushuang showed no disrespect whatsoever. Instead, she respectfully cupped her hands in greeting. Your Highness, what brings you here this time? At this moment, the Emperor at the top slowly opened his eyes and looked at Chu Wushuang with a deep gaze. After he finished speaking, there was still a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Reporting to the Emperor, a great Emperor-level inheritance has appeared in the sky above the sea. So Wushuang wants to go and see it, and also wants to see the contemporary prodigies. Upon hearing the Emperor's words, Chu Wushuang revealed his purpose without hesitation and then silently awaited the Emperor's reply. Upon hearing Chu Wushuang's words, the Emperor immediately released his divine sense. In just a moment, he sensed the inheritance above the East Sea. Then he frowned, because this inheritance is practically useless to them. After all, this inheritance is merely the inheritance of the great Emperor. He has already reached the level of an immortal in the mortal world. Therefore, they didn't value this tradition at all. However, upon hearing that Chu Wushuang wanted to go out for training, he understood what Chu Wushuang meant. Since Your Highness is going out to gain experience, then let the great accomplishment holy body accompany Your Highness. Then his voice rang out slowly, and at the same time, the Emperor silently turned his gaze toward the great accomplished holy body. During this period, the strength of the great accomplished holy body also successfully broke through to the level of a first emperor. After all, tens of thousands of years had passed inside the Time Pagoda during this period, so it was quite normal for him to be able to break through to this level. And this is the Emperor's Qilin chariot. Before he went into seclusion, he said that if you were to go on a training expedition one day, he would give you the Qilin chariot. Then, as if he had thought of something, The emperor quickly waved his hand. Then a golden chariot appeared before everyone. The golden chariots were pulled by golden Qilin. More importantly, each of these golden Qilins has reached the quasi-emperor level. Any single Qilin can rival the cultivation of the ancestors of those holy lands. However, he is indeed a bit weaker than Chu Fan is now. This is why he left the golden Qilin chariot to his son. Then the emperor slowly looked up at the sky. The next second, hundreds of figures appeared in front of him. These figures all exuded a terrifying aura. The aura emanating from each of them had already reached the great sage realm. More importantly, the two leaders had reached the quasi-emperor realm. In addition, they radiated a golden light. The Imperial Guards greet your highness and all seniors. Then, the army quickly saluted Chu Wuxuang and everyone present, their eyes filled with respect. Since we're going to the East Sea for training anyway, let's bring the Emperor's Imperial Guard. After waving his hand at the Imperial Guards, the Emperor slowly spoke to Chu Wuxuang. Chapter 707 Chu Wuxuang and Chu Yanran leave Chang'an City. The geniuses gather in the skies above the East Sea. At the same time, a terrifying power emanated from the Emperor's body, and then a beam of light radiating terrifying pressure entered Chu Wuxuang's body. Then the light vanished without a trace. Chu Wuxuang knew that the Emperor had left a life-saving measure inside his body, so he respectfully cupped his hands in a salute to the Emperor. Long Qi, protect his highness. Then the Emperor addressed the Emperor's Guard and the Imperial Guard who was at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. Long Qi swears to protect his highness with his life. Upon hearing the Emperor's words, the Emperor's Guard immediately knelt down and looked at Chu Wuxuang with a determined expression. We swear to protect his highness with our lives. The other Imperial Guards also knelt down and spoke. Chu Wuxuang couldn't help but feel awe upon seeing this scene. Then he bowed to the Emperor again before stepping onto the Qilin chariot. The Qilin chariot roared, its voice sounding as if it were bidding farewell. Then the Qilin chariot shot straight into the sky. The Emperor's Imperial Guards naturally followed alongside the Qilin chariot. This is why the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire left the Great Xia Empire. Just after Chu Wuxuang left, the Emperor leisurely turned his gaze toward the direction of Chang'an City. Perhaps it could be said that his gaze is now fixed on the direction of the prince of Jinbei's mansion. Go and protect Her Highness the Princess. I'm sure she won't miss this opportunity to enter the Emperor's secret realm. As a being of the red dust immortal level, the Emperor could naturally sense that Chu Yanran was secretly leaving Chang'an City. So he said to the great body master beside him with a somewhat helpless expression, the great body of Chu Yanran has now broken through to the level of a first emperor. So as long as the top experts in the Forbidden Zone and the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy do not make a move, no one in this universe can threaten Chu Yanran. Therefore, the Emperor naturally dispatched the Great Accomplishment Overlord Body. Of course, the most important thing is that both the Great Accomplishment Overlord Body and the Great Accomplishment Holy Body have just broken through to the first-generation Emperor. They're still a long way from breaking through again. Therefore, he decided to send out these two people. As a powerful figure at the Immortal Realm, he was naturally qualified to send out these Emperors of the Great Xia Empire. After hearing the Emperor's words, the Great Accomplishment Overlord smiled, and then transformed into a beam of light and disappeared from the hall. Upon witnessing this scene, everyone went into seclusion. At the same time, their figures disappeared directly into the palace. They soon reappeared in the Time Pagoda. Those who appeared inside the Time Pagoda also began their seclusion. It greedily absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy. The power emanating from the Emperor at this moment was also extremely terrifying. He was originally a top-tier prodigy. Now, he is only one step away from breaking through to the level of the second Emperor. Therefore, he is currently absorbing the terrifying spiritual energy around him, just as Chu Wuxuang and Chu Yanran left the Great Xia Empire. At this time, many more outstanding talents appeared in the skies above the East China Sea. In front of them lay an island. The very center of the island exudes an aura of terror. This terrifying aura is keeping these prodigies out. This meant that these exceptional talents could only stand in the skies above the East China Sea. Of course, these prodigies were also waiting for this terrifying aura to dissipate so they could enter the Great Emperor's secret realm. Standing prominently on the East Sea was Jian Yunlong, the holy son of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land. The terrifying sword aura emanating from him made the surrounding geniuses dare not approach him, although he is currently only at the saintly perfection realm. But no matter what, he is still the holy son of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land. Therefore, his strength is naturally not particularly weak. Meanwhile, the other prodigies were also watching this holy son of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land. After all, this holy son's strength was something they had never seen before. Of course, There were other top talents also staring at the back with curiosity in their eyes, because they wanted to see just how strong the other prodigies really were. At that very moment, terrifying auras emanated from the sky. Then, a giant silver-white bird slowly appeared before everyone, pulling a dazzling-looking palace. Above the palace, a large character for Phoenix was prominently engraved. Phoenix Holy Land. I didn't expect to be the first Holy Land to appear before the others. I heard that the current goddess of Phoenix Holy Land, Fengqinga, possesses the legendary white bird holy body, and her cultivation has reached the legendary Saint King realm. I wonder if it's true. Upon seeing this palace, one of the prodigies couldn't help but speak up. After he finished speaking, his eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at the magnificent palace. The aura emanating from that giant silver white bird had reached the saintly realm, shocking all the geniuses present. Fengqinga, I hope your strength isn't particularly weak. At this moment, Jian Yunlong from the Heavenly Sword Holy Land slowly raised his head and looked towards the horizon, his eyes filled with anticipation as he gazed at the location of Fengqinga from the Phoenix Holy Land. His gaze seemed to penetrate the palace, landing on the exceptionally beautiful woman inside. Amidst the curious gazes of the assembled prodigies, a woman with an extremely alluring appearance slowly emerged from the palace. The woman was wearing a golden phoenix robe. It also radiated a golden light. Of course, most importantly, her cultivation level had truly reached the early stage of Saint King. However, Fengqinga, who had just appeared, immediately turned her gaze towards Jian Yunlong's direction. At this moment, Fengqinga could sense that Jian Yunlong was quite powerful, so she nodded to Jian Yunlong. Just as Fengqinga of the Phoenix Holy Land appeared with her disciples, a terrifying roar sounded again from behind. Then, several dragons came into view. Moreover, the aura emanating from these dragons had also reached the saintly realm. Behind the dragon was a black chariot, surrounded by many soldiers exuding the aura of a true king. They all exuded a terrifying aura. The cultivation level of these soldiers alone has already reached the level of ordinary geniuses. Of course, many geniuses are at this level. For example, several holy sons of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land have also reached this level. Then, a chariot pulled by a dragon slowly appeared in the sky. A proud voice slowly emanated from inside the chariot. There was a hint of disdain in that proud voice. Jian Yunlong, I didn't expect that after so much time, your cultivation level still hasn't broken through to the Saint King realm. You're a complete waste. As that disdainful voice slowly echoed inside the chariot, a tall, pale-faced young man slowly stepped out of the dragon chariot. Chapter 708 The Four Young Masters of the Demonic Sect, Xia Wuqing, who was once utterly defeated by Chu Fan. At the same time, one could also sense an aura belonging to the Saint King realm emanating from this young man. Of course, the aura emanating from him was only from someone who had just broken through to the Saint King realm. However, in terms of realm alone, he has already surpassed Jian Yunlong. Xia Wuqing, do you think you could defeat me just because you've broken through to the Saint King realm? Upon hearing the young man's words, Jian Yunlong showed no anger. Instead, he slowly stepped forward, looked at the young man, and spoke. After he finished speaking, the terrifying sword energy emanating from his body shot straight into the sky. It was as if they wanted to kill the young man in front of them. After hearing Jian Yunlong's words, the young man named Xia Wuqing glanced at Jian Yunlong. Then, the same aura emanated from the person's entire body. Two terrifying auras collided repeatedly in the sky. This caused a sense of shock to appear in the eyes of the surrounding geniuses who were watching the spectacle. Is he Xia Wuqing from the Heavenly Evil Sect? I heard he's one of the four young masters of the demonic sect. It seems his strength is indeed not as simple as the legends say. At this moment, a prodigy slowly stepped forward, looked at Xia Wuqing, and spoke. Feeling the power emanating from Xia Wuqing's body, the prodigy's eyes were filled with shock. Xia Wuqing is known as one of the four young masters of the demonic sect, and he is also the only one who has always been in the public eye. Unfortunately, in his last battle with the young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire, he was defeated in just one move and was almost killed by the young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire. This became a laughing stock among others. Xia Wuqing, I didn't expect that your Dao heart would be found again in just a few years. I wonder if you will challenge that young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire again when you meet him. Just as Jian Yunlong and Xia Wuqing were about to engage in a fierce battle, a mocking voice slowly drifted from the sky. Then, a road paved with golden light slowly appeared before everyone. The next second, a young man radiating golden light slowly appeared in front of everyone, with many young people standing behind him. Of course, there's also an old man exuding the aura of a great sage standing behind him. He looked at Xiao Wuqing with a mocking expression and then slowly landed beside Jian Yunlong and the others. Yang Patian, have the guts to fight me. Xiao Wuqing least wanted to hear that he had been instantly killed by the young supreme being of the great Xia Empire. So he was naturally furious after hearing the young man's words. You think you can fight me? You should take a piss and see if you have the ability. After hearing Xiao Wuqing's words, Yang Patian slowly spoke, his eyes filled with a hint of mockery. After hearing Yang Potion's words, Jian Yunlong slowly stepped forward, looking at Xiao Wuqing with a mocking gaze. Isn't it a bit inappropriate for you to bully one of the 4 young masters of my demonic sect like this? Why don't you try your skills against me? Just as Yang Patian finished speaking, a domineering voice slowly came from the sky, and then a young man with a terrifying aura appeared in front of everyone. More importantly, the terrifying demonic aura emanating from him seemed capable of completely staining the entire world black. He was also carrying a halberd in his hand. He looked very dignified. Murong Zhantian, I didn't expect you to come too, but do you think you could defeat me? After hearing the young man's words, Yang Patian also spoke slowly. However, it was clear that he was somewhat wary of this young man. Murong Zhantian, I didn't expect that Murong Zhantian, one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, would also appear. It seems that we are not destined to inherit the great emperor's legacy this time. Yes, 2 of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect have already appeared. I wonder if the other prodigies will appear again. What I'm more curious about now is whether that young prodigy will actually appear. After all, the young prodigy of the Great Xia Empire is recognized as the most outstanding genius of this era. That young supreme being from the Great Xia Empire is unlikely to appear. After all, the Great Xia Empire has no shortage of emperor-level successors. Although the Great Xia Empire is not lacking in the succession of emperors, this young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire should come. After all, how could he possibly miss such a situation? The group of prodigies present began to discuss the matter, and many of them had expressions of disappointment in their eyes. At first, they thought they could receive the emperor's inheritance. However, as more and more prodigies arrive, they feel that their chances of receiving the inheritance are becoming increasingly slim, and now they even feel that they have no chance of receiving it all. However, at this time, many more geniuses were curious whether the young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire would come. After all, the young prodigy of the Great Xia Empire was widely recognized as the most outstanding genius of this era. So what they were more curious about was whether this young supreme being would actually come to suppress these prodigies. Of course, some people think that the young supreme ruler of the Great Xia Empire will not come. After all, this young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire would not be interested in such an emperor-level inheritance, because the number of emperor-level powerhouses in the Great Xia Empire is limited. So how could he possibly be interested in a lineage at the level of an emperor? After hearing the discussion among these top prodigies, Jian Yunlong and the other top talents all turned their gazes into the distance. His eyes held a mixture of expectation and melancholy. They were eager to see this young prodigy. The disappointment lies in whether they could still obtain the emperor-level inheritance if this young supreme being appeared. As for Xiao Wuqing, he trembled when he heard the name of this young supreme being from the Great Xia Empire, because only those who had actually fought against this young supreme being knew the extent of his strength. Xiao Wuqing challenged this young supreme only because he heard that the young supreme's name was very prestigious. However, the final outcome was quite clear. The young supreme being of the Great Xia Empire defeated Xiao Wuqing in a single day. And if Xiao Wuqing hadn't escaped so quickly, by now, his grave is probably overgrown with weeds. Thinking of this, he also recalled that terrifying figure. So his eyes were filled with lingering fear. Although he was furious after hearing Yang Potion's words, even after breaking through to the Saint King realm, he was still extremely afraid of this young supreme being from the Great Xia Empire. Chapter 709, the 4 young masters of the demonic sect gather, and the top prodigies of the War God Palace appear. With the arrival of Murong Zhantian, one of the top prodigies among the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, terrifying auras slowly began to appear in the sky. The owners of these terrifying auras are all the most outstanding talents of this generation. 2 of them exuded a terrifying aura. From these terrifying auras, one can sense that the strength of these 2 top geniuses has reached the Saint King realm. More importantly, these 2 prodigies looked down with a hint of disdain in their eyes. Then, one of the prodigies, emanating a terrifying aura, looked at Xiao Wuqing with some disdain and spoke. Everyone says that the strength of our demonic sect's 4 young masters is among the top of the contemporary geniuses, but I think there are only 3 young masters in our demonic sect. You, Xiao Wuqing, are not worthy of being called one of the 4 young masters. After the young man finished speaking, he released the terrifying aura emanating from his body. Then he walked directly to a spot not far from Xia Wuqing and the others. However, it's clear that he now holds a hint of disdain for Xia Wuqing. Xia Wuqing was furious after hearing the young man's words. He stared at the young man with anger in his eyes. Wang Yun, don't think I'm afraid of you, just because you have a natural demonic body. If you're not convinced, let's fight and see if you're unworthy to be called one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, or if I'm not worthy to be called one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect. Xia Wuqing stepped forward and spoke to the young man, releasing his terrifying aura. He stared angrily at one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect in front of him. I'm also curious whether you, Wang Yun, or Xia Wuqing are more powerful. Anyway, the great emperor's secret realm hasn't opened yet, so why don't you two have a big battle? The burly young man who had appeared with the 4 young masters of the demonic sect slowly descended from the sky and spoke. After he finished speaking, there was still a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Of course, all of this was presented by him. After hearing the burly young man's words, Wang Yun and Xia Wuqing both glanced at him with anger in their eyes. Then he fell silent. However, it was clear that both of them were extremely angry with the burly young man. The 3 of you are, after all, the 3 young masters of our demonic sect. Now you've made such a fuss over such a trivial matter. Aren't you afraid that these righteous people will laugh at us? At this moment, Murong Zhantian stood up slowly and said with some helplessness, although the 3 young masters of their demonic sect, plus this young master, are all considered to be at the Saint King level, there are quite a few righteous people present who have reached the Saint King level. More importantly, the most outstanding talents among the righteous people have not yet appeared. Therefore, they cannot afford to lose their composure now. Upon hearing Murong Zhantian's words, the 3 young masters of the demonic sect also let out a cold snort. They then began to dislike each other, but they didn't argue at this point. Instead, they calmly awaited the arrival of those so-called prodigies. Those righteous people also showed a hint of disappointment on their faces after seeing the 4 young masters of the demonic sect begin to reconcile. At first, they wanted to see the internal conflict among the 4 young masters of the demonic sect. However, to everyone's surprise, the 4 young masters of the demonic sect resolved the civil war so easily. At the same time, several top talents looked at Murong Zhantian with a solemn expression, because Murong Zhantian had resolved the infighting among the 3 young masters of the demonic sect with just one sentence. This shows that Murong Zhantian is quite intelligent. Unlike other demonic cult princes, he was not warlike. The cultivators below were also shocked to see the arrival of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect. They hadn't expected the 4 young masters of the demonic sect to arrive so quickly. You should know that not many of the geniuses in the mortal world have come here yet. Only 3 righteous geniuses who came here have reached the Saint King realm. Besides the 4 young masters, the demonic sect also has 2 prodigies who have reached the Saint King realm. However, they were older than the 4 young masters. Therefore, these 2 prodigies of the demonic sect cannot be called the 4 young masters. However, no matter what, their cultivation level has reached the Saint King realm. Therefore, their strength is considered quite good. Just as everyone was still feeling emotional, war horns sounded one after another in the sky. Then a terrifying aura came from the sky. The next second, a warship pulled by a silver-white dragon appeared in front of everyone. Above the warship pulled by the silver-white dragon, the 3 large characters, War God Palace, are clearly engraved. This shows that the War God Palace has appeared this time. The War God Palace was originally one of the top powers in the entire central region. Of course, he was inferior to the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family. However, it is by no means weaker than those holy sites. More importantly, the War God Palace also boasts some of the strongest prodigies in this era. Take, for example, the well-known Long Zhantian, whose strength has reached the Saint King realm. More importantly, he has also progressed very far in the Saint King realm. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a young man dressed in a golden robe slowly walked out of the War God Palace. The youth emanated a terrifying golden light. More importantly, his golden robe made him look dazzling. He looked down at the prodigy with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Then he slowly descended from the sky. A golden light paved a road for him beneath his feet. This made Long Zhantian seem like a true god of war. Behind Long Zhantian were several prodigies from the War God Palace. 2 of these prodigies have even reached the Saint King realm. The most dazzling figure was the young man to Long Zhantian's right, who was holding a long sword in his arms. The young man exuded a terrifying sword aura. If it weren't for Long Zhantian, perhaps he is the most dazzling presence in the skies above this sea area. To Long Zhantian's left was a woman holding a long purple whip. The aura emanating from the woman had clearly reached the Saint King realm. Of course, the most important thing is not a woman's cultivation level. It was the captivating aura emanating from the woman that truly captivated people. The cultivators below were instantly captivated by the woman the moment they saw her. Even many of the most talented individuals only had eyes for this woman. The woman smiled gently upon seeing this. Her smile was incredibly alluring. Chapter 710 Long Zhantian's disdain for the four young masters of the demonic sect. Murong Zhantian versus Long Zhantian. Even the four young masters of the demonic sect looked at Long Zhantian with a solemn expression. They had naturally heard of Long Zhantian. After all, he possessed the legendary Battle Saint Body. Therefore, they naturally knew that this person was a top genius among the righteous people. Therefore, the four young masters of the demonic sect naturally attached great importance to the possessors of the Battle Saint Body. Even at this moment, Jian Yunlong's eyes were filled with a burning desire as he looked in Long Zhantian's direction. Although his cultivation was the weakest among all the top talents present. However, Jian Yunlong's strength is not much weaker than these top geniuses. They could even fight against these geniuses with their saintly perfection cultivation. This was because the former Heavenly Sword ancestor of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land had fallen into poverty, which made the strength of the geniuses of the Heavenly Sword Holy Land far weaker than that of the geniuses of other top forces. The four young masters of the demonic sect? They're called the four young masters of the demonic sect with this kind of strength. Long Zhantian then slowly turned his gaze to the four young masters of the demonic sect, and with a hint of contempt in his eyes, he spoke. After he finished speaking, a terrifying golden aura instantly emanated from his body. Moreover, the aura of the Battle Saint Body was also fully released. The contempt in his eyes was completely undisguised. The four young masters of the demonic sect looked at Long Zhantian with a solemn expression upon seeing this scene. Xiao Wuqing stepped forward without any hesitation. The terrifying aura emanating from him instantly swept across the entire sky. In an instant, the two terrifying auras collided in the sky. Upon witnessing this scene, the surrounding prodigies quickly left the area. After all, this place is no longer a place they can stay. The young man carrying a long sword beside Long Zhantian also quickly stepped forward upon seeing this scene. A terrifying sword aura emanated from his body. He looked at Xiao Wuqing with a hint of fighting spirit in his eyes. If you want to fight the Holy Sun, you'll have to get past me first. Then his cold and ruthless voice came out. The next second, he drew the long sword from his chest. Carrying overwhelming sword intent, it charged down towards Xiao Wuqing below. Upon seeing this, Xiao Wuqing's face instantly broke into a playful smile. Then, a terrifying aura instantly emanated from his body. At the same time, a long spear instantly appeared in his hand. A terrifying black aura instantly flowed into the spear. The next second, a long spear that seemed capable of piercing through the entire space-time was sent flying toward Long Zhantian's followers. The terrifying forces collided instantly. Sword energy and spear energy instantly spread for hundreds of miles, while Long Zhantian's followers were not weak. However, Xiao Wuqing is one of the four young masters, so how could his strength be weaker than Long Zhantian's follower? Then, Xiao Wuqing stood calmly in the sky. Long Zhantian's followers were forced to retreat hundreds of feet in the sky. Looking at Xiao Wuqing with a look of confusion and disbelief, this follower of Long Zhantian had initially thought that the only person he could not defeat was Long Zhantian. But I never expected that the four young masters of the demonic sect would be so terrifying. Even so, Long Zhantian's follower did not intend to give up. A silver-white sword light instantly appeared on his body. The next second, he charged towards Xiao Wuqing once again. Upon seeing this scene, Xiao Wuqing's eyes instantly flashed with murderous intent. Then, the spear in his hand instantly appeared above his head. The next second, a giant black dragon appeared from behind Xiao Wuqing. This giant black dragon tore through space and time, heading straight for Long Zhantian's follower. Long Zhantian's followers had not expected that Xiao Wuqing's strength was so terrifying. However, he no longer has the chance to stop. Therefore, the two terrifying forces collided in the sky in an instant. Xiao Wuqing staggered back 2 steps in the air. He looked at the young man flying backwards with a look of surprise and astonishment in his eyes. Meanwhile, the young man who had fought him was sent flying thousands of feet away. Upon seeing this, Xiao Wuqing's killing intent intensified. He then transformed into a streak of light and charged towards Long Zhantian's follower. Upon seeing this, Long Zhantian immediately took action. A giant golden hand suddenly descended from the sky. It was as if they wanted to completely suppress the evil and ruthless. Seeing this, Xiao Wuqing knew he had missed his best chance to strike. Then he threw a punch straight into the sky. A terrifying black fist shadow instantly filled the entire sky. The golden palm and the black fist collided instantly. At the moment of impact, the entire sky shook violently. Xiao Wuqing was blasted hundreds of feet away by this terrifying force, while Long Zhantian, who was in front of him, was also incredibly powerful. However, he also stumbled backward several dozen steps. He looked at Xia Wuqing with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Long Zhantian hadn't expected Xia Wuqing to be so strong. At first, he thought his followers could also defeat Xia Wuqing. The other 3 young masters of the demonic sect, who were watching the battle, also frowned upon seeing this scene. Especially at this time, Murong Zhantian, although his relationship with Xia Wuqing was not particularly good. However, if Xia Wuqing were to lose to Long Zhantian, it would mean that the 4 young masters of their demonic sect were merely empty shells. Having thought of this, Murong Zhantian also chose to take action directly. He then threw a vicious punch forward. The next second, a blood-red dragon appeared behind him. The blood-red dragon didn't stop at all and headed straight for Long Zhantian in front of it. Upon seeing this scene, Long Zhantian's eyes instantly turned serious. Then he threw a punch into the sky in the same way. The next second, a golden phoenix appeared behind him. However, this golden phoenix is not particularly pure. Besides the gold color, there were also traces of red and yellow on his body. Therefore, it looks like a phoenix with mixed feathers. However, these 2 terrifying forces still collided. Then Long Zhantian and Murong Zhantian took a few steps back from each other. They looked at each other with a serious expression in their eyes. War God Palace Dragon battles the heavens. Murong Zhantian of the demonic sect. The 2 also called each other by their names. Moreover, the 2 are very destined to meet. Murong Zhantian of the demonic sect possesses the legendary demonic body, making him extremely powerful. Long Zhantian possesses the legendary battle saint body, so his strength is beyond question. Of course, the most important thing is their names. Chapter 7:11 The relationship between the Temple of War God and the Palace of War God, one of the 3 top powers on the continent. The other 2 young masters of the demonic sect were also eager to try their luck after witnessing this scene. Although they are all known as the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, everyone in the sect knows that the strongest among them is Murong Zhantian. After all, Murong Zhantian's strength far surpasses that of the other 3 young masters. This is why they stopped mocking Murong Zhantian as soon as he spoke. The woman following behind, Long Zhantian, frowned upon seeing this scene. After witnessing Murong Zhantian's strength, she understood that if the 4 young masters of the demonic sect were to attack them, their current strength would be insufficient to stop them. Thinking of this, the woman looked around at the righteous people with some worry, since they were the only ones who could help them now. At this moment, many righteous prodigies were looking in Long Zhantian's direction with evasive eyes. After all, their strength was not particularly great to begin with, so how could they possibly resist the 4 young masters of the demonic sect so easily? Moreover, apart from the 4 young masters, the other prodigies in the demonic sect are not particularly weak either. Who would do something so thankless and exhausting these days? The top geniuses, however, did not make any move when they saw this. After all, for them, everyone in the lineage of the great emperor is a formidable competitor. Moreover, this Long Zhantian possesses the legendary battle saint body, so they are naturally very happy to see him severely injured and unable to enter the great emperor's inheritance. As for the claim that Long Zhantian perished here, that's simply impossible. His strength alone makes it difficult for him to perish, not to mention that there are elders from the War God Palace here as well. This elder's strength had already reached the great sage realm, so how could he possibly watch his own prodigy perish? Is the demonic sect planning to bully the weak with numbers? Do you really think you can be so high-profile with just a few small fry? Just as a solemn expression appeared on Long Zhantian's face, a domineering voice came from the sky. At the same time, a colossal black dragon, pulling an ancient palace, slowly appeared before everyone. Above this ancient palace are the 3 large characters Temple of the God of War. The sound just now came from the Temple of War. As everyone's gaze turned, a young man exuding a terrifying aura slowly walked out of the Temple of War. Of course, the most important thing is that the aura emanating from this young man is extremely terrifying. Even the group of geniuses present showed a hint of fear in their eyes when they saw this scene. Long Zhantian shook his head helplessly. Among the prodigies present, perhaps only Long Zhantian knew the true extent of this prodigy's strength. Who are you? Why have I never heard of you before? Looking at the aura emanating from the young man in the sky, Murong Zhantian also looked at the young man with a solemn expression and spoke. At the same time, he also understood that he was no match for this young man. After hearing Murong Zhantian's words, the others also stared at the young man with great curiosity. They also wanted to see just how strong this young man really was. War God Temple War Sovereign. The young man smiled after hearing Murong Zhantian's words, and then replied in a very domineering manner. His domineering voice reached the ears of all the geniuses present. Therefore, all the geniuses present instantly knew the young man's name. The War God Temple's Warlord. Why have I never heard of this name before? This War God Venerable of the War God Temple is obviously helping Long Zhantian of the War God Palace. Could there be some connection between the War God Temple and the War God Palace? How could they not be related? If they weren't, why would one be called the Temple of War God and the other the Palace of War God? If you put it that way, it actually does seem to make a slight sense. Good. After hearing what the War God said, everyone present began to discuss it. Meanwhile, many people are curious about the relationship between the Palace of War and the Temple of War. After all, their names are so similar. Therefore, there must be a significant relationship between them. Meanwhile, the prodigies from those holy lands present frowned. The elders of the Holy Land, in particular, showed a look of shock in their eyes. As elders of the Holy Land, they naturally knew of the existence of the Temple of War. They simply did not expect that the Temple of War would appear in this era. At the same time, the Temple of War Gods actually possesses such a terrifying genius. It turns out that there was a close relationship between the Temple of War and the Palace of War, or you could say that the Temple of War was originally the Palace of War. However, the Temple of War is the core of the Palace of War. Therefore, the Temple of War would not appear in ordinary times. The Temple of War will only appear during a true Golden Age. The emergence of the Temple of War signifies the arrival of a true Golden Age. Of course, while the War God Temple is powerful, it is still weaker than the Xianyuan family and the former Heavenly God Academy. After all, although two Emperor-level beings have appeared in the Temple of War, the Temple of War rarely appears in the public eye. The strength of the War God Palace is only about the same as that of those holy lands. This has led many people to overlook the Temple of War. However, the Temple of War is still superior to these holy sites in any way. After all, many people have speculated that there are powerful individuals in the Temple of War who have achieved enlightenment in a different way. Of course, this is merely speculation by the quasi-emperor level experts of these holy lands. They naturally don't know whether there are alternative ways to achieve enlightenment. Moreover, even if there are those who attain enlightenment through unconventional means, so what? Right now, there are great emperors in the Heavenly God Academy of the Great Xia Empire or in the Xianyuan family. Therefore, even if they possess alternative paths to enlightenment, they cannot truly become the most powerful forces. Currently, there are only 3 top forces that are recognized by the entire universe. One of them is the Great Xia Empire, which is top-tier experts. Many people in the Great Xia Empire are powerful figures of a certain level. Of course, the Great Xia Empire ignored these people's speculations. Therefore, many people are now unaware whether the final figure in the Great Xia Empire was a powerful immortal-level expert. The second top power is the Heavenly God Academy. After all, there are also powerful individuals in the Heavenly God Academy who are suspected to be at the immortal realm. Therefore, it is perfectly normal for him to be called a top force. The third top power is the Xianyuan family. After all, the strength displayed by Xianyuan Wudao of the Xianyuan family had reached a terrifying level. Moreover, no one knows whether the powerful emperors in the Xianyuan family can return to the Xianyuan family. Therefore, he is also known as the third top power. Chapter 7:12, the demonic cult's demonic son, makes his appearance, and 2 top prodigies face off. Of course, there's also the Butian Pavilion in addition to these. However, there is still a gap between the current Butian Pavilion and the top 3 forces on the continent. After all, although the Heaven-Mending Pavilion was once one of the 2 top powers, but that was under the premise that the Great Xia Empire had not yet emerged, and the Xianyuan family had not yet appeared. With the emergence of the Great Xia Empire and the birth of the Xianyuan family, the strength of the Butian Pavilion dropped to 4th place. Moreover, even in 4th place, he is not as good as the top 3, because both the Great Xia Empire, which is recognized as the number 1, and the Heavenly God Academy, which is recognized as the number 2, can easily defeat the Heaven-Mending Pavilion. In everyone's mind, the Heaven-Mending Pavilion is now associated with the Heaven-Mending Stone, which can summon ancient emperors. Otherwise, the unconventional Dao-attaining experts in the Heaven-Mending Pavilion would indeed not be able to support them. After all, the 3 top powers on the mainland are still too powerful. Not to mention the Great Xia Empire. The Xianyuan family alone has an emperor-level figure. More importantly, this emperor-level powerhouse is not just any ordinary emperor-level powerhouse. An emperor-level being who has lived in this universe for hundreds of thousands of years. How could such an emperor-level being be weak? This is why the Great Xia Empire, the Heavenly God Academy, and the Xianyuan family are known as the 3 top powers on the continent. As for the other holy lands, they are known as first-class forces. You should know that they were once dominant forces. However, they now have no choice but to submit to the Great Xia Empire, the Heavenly God Academy, and the Xianyuan family. After all, the strength of these three top powers far surpasses that of these holy lands. Even so, the War God Palace, or War God Temple, is still considered one of the most prestigious establishments. After all, the Temple of War once housed two emperors. More importantly, there should be other enlightened beings within the Temple of War. Therefore, the Temple of War is naturally very powerful. At this moment, the War Venerable who stepped out looked at the four young masters of the demonic sect with a disdainful gaze. At the same time, the terrifying aura emanating from him poured directly towards the four young masters of the demonic sect. The terrifying power caused the four young masters of the demonic sect to look at the war god who had emerged from the Temple of War with shock in their eyes, because they hadn't expected that the war god who came out of the Temple of War would be so terrifyingly powerful. It should be noted that the four young masters of the demonic sect are considered to be the most outstanding figures in the sect. Therefore, their strength is naturally among the top. I never expected that the war god in the Temple of War would be so terrifyingly powerful. Even Long Zhantian shook his head helplessly at this moment, although he is indeed a top-tier prodigy with the Battle Saint body. However, compared to this war god, he still felt that he was far inferior. I never expected that the divine son of the War God Temple would bully a cultivator weaker than himself like this. It seems that the War God Temple is no longer the War God Temple it once was. Just as the four young masters of the demonic sect were looking at the war god with solemn expressions, a mocking voice suddenly came from the sky. Then, a terrifying demonic aura fell from the sky. The next second, the entire sky was dyed blood red. At the same time, a very muscular man appeared in the sky. The aura emanating from him was also extremely terrifying. Most importantly, this very robust young man was wearing a long, dark robe. His eyes, devoid of any emotion, gazed upon the war god of the temple. At the same time, one can sense that the aura emanating from him is extremely terrifying. He then gently pointed a finger forward. The terrifying aura instantly and completely dispelled the terrifying power emanating from the war god. He then appeared directly in front of the four young masters of the demonic sect. Upon seeing the robust young man before them, the four young masters of the demonic sect all bowed to him. Murong Zhantian / Xia Wuqing pays respects to the demon prince. All four of them had a respectful look in their eyes. This shows that the young man held a very high position within the demonic sect. After hearing what the four people said, the young man simply waved his hand at them. Then he slowly turned his gaze to the war god in the sky. I don't like being looked at like that. So get down here. The demon prince looked at the war lord with a calm expression and spoke, while the terrifying demonic energy emanating from his body instantly rushed towards the warlord. The terrifying power directly crushed towards the war god. This made him somewhat unsteady on his feet. However, at this moment, the war god still looked at the young man from the demon clan with a determined expression. A golden light instantly emanated from his body. The terrifying fist flew directly towards the direction of the terrifying demonic energy. The next second, the two terrifying forces collided directly. As these two terrifying forces collided, the entire sky began to shake violently. Those geniuses whose cultivation levels weren't very high to begin with were also constantly fleeing, because they could sense that if these two terrifying powers were to fall on them, they would definitely perish. However, it was too late for them to escape now, because this terrifying force was about to descend upon them. Many prodigies now looked at the two terrifying forces in the sky with a look of despair on their faces, because they could sense these two terrifying forces that could completely annihilate them. Even the top geniuses like Jian Yunlong looked at the two terrifying attacks with a solemn expression. Of course, these top geniuses could withstand these attacks. It could even save these so-called prodigies. However, they did not choose to save these prodigies. Just when everyone thought they were about to perish, a silvery white light suddenly appeared in the sky. The silvery white light was very gentle. In an instant, it enveloped the two forces in the sky that were about to explode. Then, these two terrifying forces were completely annihilated. This prevented these two terrifying forces from spreading in the surrounding areas. Therefore, these geniuses in the sky were saved by this silvery white light. At this moment, both the young demon and the war god temple looked into the distance with solemn expressions. They had just sensed this silvery white aura, and the power it emitted far exceeded their expectations. They even thought it must have been an older generation of experts who made the move. Otherwise, there shouldn't be anyone so terrifying among the younger generation. Chapter 7:13, The War Venerable's Provocation. The mysterious prodigy takes action, defeating the War Venerable in one move. Even the powerful figures at the great sage level turned their gazes to the distance. After all, even they could feel the terrifying pressure carried within this silvery white aura. Keep in mind that they have already reached the great sage realm, yet they still felt the pressure. This shows that the person who just made the move was not as simple as they had imagined. As for the geniuses below, they retreated with lingering fear in their eyes. However, at this point they were also very curious about who had saved them. After all, if it weren't for that silvery white light, those so-called prodigies would probably have already perished by now. Under everyone's gaze, a handsome young man dressed in a black robe slowly appeared in the sky. He always had a gentle smile on his face. He also had his hands behind his back. As if it didn't see the people below, it slowly came up to their heads. Then he glanced leisurely at the war god temple's war venerable, and then at the demon prince of the demonic sect. After doing all this, he slowly turned his gaze to the other prodigies. Your personal grievances shouldn't involve them. Then his voice drifted into everyone's ears. At the same time, it was clear that the young man's words were a rebuke to the two war venerables who had just made their move and the demonic child of the demonic sect. Although there was some reproach in his voice, one could still hear a gentleness in it. He was like a gentle and refined gentleman. This caused all the female cultivators present to look at the young man with a hint of shyness in their eyes. Many female cultivators even wished they could throw themselves at him at this point. What I do is none of your business. Upon hearing the young man's words, the war god of the temple could no longer sit still, so he stood up and looked at the young man, speaking directly. At the same time, he also directly released the terrifying aura emanating from his body. As the aura of the war god was released, it became clear that the war god's strength had reached the late stage of Saint King. It should be noted that among the geniuses present, there are some whose strength is only at the king level. Therefore, a war venerable who has reached the late stage of Saint King can naturally stand out from the crowd. But he's now targeting the wrong person. As for the demonic disciple of the demonic sect, he looked at the war god with a strange smile after hearing his words. Although he wanted to refute the young man's words, he could naturally sense that the young man's strength far surpassed theirs. Therefore, the current demonic cult's demon prince has no intention of making a move. His smile deepened after he saw the war god step forward. It has nothing to do with me, but if I want to help them, what does it have to do with you? The young man's lips curled up slightly after hearing what the war god said. Then, he calmly turned his gaze to the war god temple's warlord in front of him. The contempt in his eyes was revealed without the slightest hesitation. Upon seeing the contempt in the young man's eyes, everyone became extremely angry. This was the first time he had ever seen such contempt in someone else's eyes. Even the demon prince of the demonic sect, just now, did not make such a contemptuous move. This made him even angrier. Then, a golden light instantly emanated from his body. At the same time, he charged directly at the young man like a golden blade. The aura belonging to the late stage of Saint King was also directly unleashed from his body. The young man shook his head after seeing this. Then I saw him slightly open his fingers. The next second, a silvery white light instantly emanated from his body. The terrifying force struck the war god directly. Then, in an instant, he sent the war god flying. He floated in the air for a long time before finally stopping. She looked in the direction of the young man with an incredulous expression in her eyes. At this moment, the war god was extremely angry, and a terrifying aura instantly erupted from his body once again. At the same time, a golden sword instantly appeared in his hand. A terrifying golden sword light quickly ripped through the sky. It was as if they wanted to completely kill the young man right there. Just as the golden sword light was about to strike the young man, a playful voice slowly drifted from afar. Brother Chu actually chose to hold back against such a reckless fellow. The last sword light, also radiating a golden glow, drifted leisurely from afar. This terrifying sword light shattered the sword light unleashed by the war god. At the same time, this terrifying sword light, carrying terrifying sword energy, headed directly towards the war venerable. The next second, the terrifying sword energy landed directly on the war god. In an instant, the war god was sent flying. At the same time, a terrifying bloodstain instantly appeared on his chest. If it weren't for the magical artifacts on the war god's body, he would probably have been completely annihilated by this terrifying sword light. Upon hearing this voice, the young man leisurely turned his gaze to the distance. Then he slowly began to speak. I didn't expect Brother Xianyuan to come as well. Brother Xianyuan has also taken a fancy to the great emperor's inheritance here. The young man's voice still carried a hint of gentleness, and he showed no reaction to the rudeness of the war god just now. It was as if this was just a minor incident for him. I naturally looked down on the imperial lineage here, but I thought you would come, so I came. The voice from the sky drifted over again, and it was clear that this voice did not place particular importance on the imperial lineage here. It was actually because of the arrival of the young man that they came. As soon as his voice fell, a fiery red light appeared in the sky. The fiery red light seemed to set the entire sky ablaze. Then, a fiery red army slowly appeared before everyone. In the very center of the army, a young man, riding a fiery red warhorse, appeared before everyone. The young man was dressed in a fiery red battle robe. However, it is noticeable that his fiery red battle robe is surrounded by many golden threads. Therefore, his fiery red battle robe looked extremely dazzling. Of course, most importantly, the aura emanating from the young man far surpassed that of ordinary Saint Kings. He was carrying a golden longsword in his hand. With a hint of excitement in his eyes, he looked at the young man who had just been standing in the sky. Chapter 714, The Young Supreme Chu Fan, the fiery young Marshal Xian Yuanpa. The young man then cupped his hands in greeting to the young man in the fiery red battle robe in the sky. This time, you're the only one from your Xian Yuan family who came? At the same time, he asked the young man in the fiery red battle robe with a hint of doubt in his voice. No, my cousin should be arriving soon. The young man from the Xian Yuan family, dressed in a fiery red battle robe, shook his head after hearing the words of the young man below. But it seems that only Brother Chu from your great Xia Empire has come. Then, with a hint of curiosity, he looked at the young man in front of him and asked him a question. The group of geniuses below and the great saint-level experts from the Holy Lands immediately guessed the identities of the two after hearing their conversation. After all, the only geniuses with such terrifying strength are probably that one from the Xian Yuan family and that young supreme being from the great Xia Empire. Thinking of this, everyone turned their gaze to their loved ones. Could they be Chu Fan, the young supreme being of the great Xia Empire, and Xian Yuanpa, the young commander of the blazing fire army of the Xian Yuan family? At this moment, even a prodigy couldn't help but point tremblingly at the two figures in the sky and speak, his eyes filled with shock. At this moment, he also felt that his guess was correct. After all, the only truly terrifying geniuses in the world are probably the young supreme being of the great Xia Empire and the young marshal of the Xian Yuan family. It must be those two. If it weren't for them, how could a prodigy have defeated a war venerable so easily? Moreover, from their conversation just now, we can learn that the young man in the black robe is surnamed Chu, so he must be the young supreme being of the great Xia Empire. Yes, the other one is wearing a fiery red battle robe, and his surname is Xian Yuan. From this, we can deduce that this person is Xian Yuanpa, the #1 genius of the Xian Yuan family. I never expected that the two of them would actually reach the legendary Great Sage realm. If they both enter the Great Emperor's secret realm, then the final inheritance of the Great Emperor's secret realm, this time, will probably be obtained by the two of them. Although they may all enter the Great Emperor's secret realm, I don't think they would want to obtain the Great Emperor's secret realm's inheritance. Yes, neither the Great Xia Empire nor the Xian Yuan family cares much about the succession of the Great Emperor, so they probably won't come for this succession. The assembled prodigies then began to discuss the matter. Of course, by this time, they had also guessed the identities of the young supreme ruler of the Great Xia Empire and the young marshal of the Xian Yuan family. The two most outstanding prodigies in the world today are Chu Fan, the young supreme of the Great Xia Empire, and Xian Yuanpa, the young marshal of the Xian Yuan family. He is not just the young marshal of the Xian Yuan family. He also commanded an army on his own. This army is known as the Army of Fire. It is also the most elite army in the Xian Yuan family. More importantly, this army contains quasi-emperor level experts. The weakest cultivator who can enter this army is at the saintly realm. Therefore, this army is naturally considered the most terrifying army. This is also why Xian Yuanpa, this top prodigy, is called the young marshal, because he was able to command such an army. Therefore, his strength is naturally terrifying. After hearing the discussion among these prodigies, the war venerable and the demon prince of the demonic sect naturally guessed the identities of the two young men in front of them. And the two looked at each other and sighed. Although the two were initially hostile to each other, however, the two of them are now thinking about similar things. Because we encountered such a top-tier and terrifying genius, they were naturally deeply hurt, especially the war god. When he first entered the war god temple, he thought he was strong enough to fight against this young supreme being of the great Xia Empire. But now he truly understands just how vast the gap is between himself and this young supreme being of the great Xia Empire. So now, he looked at Chu Fan, the young supreme being of the great Xia Empire, with a hint of envy and jealousy. He believed that Chu Fan's rapid growth was due to the great Xia Empire. At this moment, Chu Fan ignored the war venerable's gaze. Instead, he looked at Xian Yuanpa in front of him with a calm expression. I wonder if your great Xia Empire's eldest prince will come out. I heard from my ancestor that your great Xia Empire's eldest prince is no weaker than me. At this moment, Xian Yuanpa looked at Chu Fan with a hint of curiosity and asked, the relationship between the Xian Yuan family and the great Xia Empire has always been very good. Therefore, Xianyuan Wudao naturally understood the extent of Chu Wushuang's strength in the Great Xia Empire. Xian Yuanpa is the most outstanding prodigy of this generation in the Xian Yuan family. Therefore, he naturally followed Xianyuan Wudao to cultivate. Therefore, he had also heard about Chu Wushuang, the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire. Wushuang probably won't come, since he needs to focus on his cultivation in Chang'an right now. After hearing Xian Yuanpa's words, Chu Chan waved his hand and said, "Of course, these are all just his own guesses." He was unaware that Chu Wushuang was already heading his way. And it wasn't just Chu Wushuang, but also Chu Yanran. Xian Yuanpa nodded after hearing Chu Chen's words. At the same time, there was a hint of regret in his eyes. Clearly, he also wanted to see just how powerful this eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire really was. Unfortunately, he would not be able to witness the strength of the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire this time. Xianyuan Pa is the #1 prodigy in the Xianyuan family. He had never taken the world's most outstanding talent seriously. The only person who could truly make him feel valued or admired was Chu Fan from the past. It could be said that all the geniuses on the continent held Chu Fan in high esteem. After all, Chu Fan achieved the human emperor realm at such a young age. Such strength and talent naturally earned them their admiration. However, later, Xianyuan Pa met Chu Chun on his way to the Great Xia Empire. The two fought a major battle in Chang'an. In the end, Chu Chun won by a slight margin. Xianyuan Pa has also found his match. So from that day on, he would come to Chang'an City from time to fight Chu Chun. Although he lost to Chu Chun every time. However, his progress was no slower than Chu Chen's, and the two later became close friends because of the great battle. Chu Chun then went to the Xianyuan family and stayed there for a year. During this time, he naturally fought against Xianyuan Pa and also got to know other geniuses of the Xianyuan family. Of course, he also got to know the great emperor of the Xianyuan family, Xianyuan Wudao. Chapter 7:15, the Heavenly God Academy appears. 3 top prodigies provoke Xian Yuanpa and his companion. Chu Chen's talent was also recognized by Xian Yuan Wudao of the Chu family. The two are also known as the Young Supreme and the Fiery Young Marshal. Therefore, their names are very well known throughout the entire continent. Both of them were known as the most outstanding prodigies on this continent. This is why everyone present could so easily guess the identities of the two. Meanwhile, the demon prince from the demonic sect was also looking at the two with a very solemn expression. He could naturally sense the terrifying aura emanating from them. It could even be said that the demonic disciple of the demonic sect clearly sensed the power within the two individuals that far surpassed their own. As expected of the Young Supreme and the Fiery Young Marshal, their cultivation levels have probably both reached the Great Sage realm. At this moment, Murong Zhantian, who was standing next to him, also spoke with a serious expression, and after he finished speaking, there was a hint of unwillingness in his eyes. After all, Murong Zhantian was one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, and his strength was also top-notch. At first, he always thought he was a true prodigy. Later, he also witnessed the power of the demonic cult's demon child. This made him realize that there were people more powerful than himself. Now, upon seeing the Young Supreme and the Fiery Young Marshal again, he fully understands that his talent is perhaps the most outstanding in the eyes of others. However, compared to these truly top-tier geniuses, his talent was insignificant, because both this Young Supreme being and this Fiery Young Marshal could easily defeat him. Meanwhile, Xia Wuqing, one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect who was standing beside him, was quite helpless. He once challenged the Young Supreme, Chu Chun, and was defeated in just one move. This made him a laughingstock of the entire demonic sect and even the whole world. Now, when facing this Young Supreme being, he can't even muster the will to challenge him. This shows just how powerful the Young Supreme being's sense of oppression was towards one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect. Chu Chun and Xian Yuanpa ignored the so-called prodigies around them. Instead, they talked very calmly about what had happened to them during this time. Of course, at this moment, the eyes of the top geniuses in the War God Palace or the War God Temple were all on the 2 of them. After all, the 2 of them were the 2 most outstanding geniuses in the world. Their biggest rivals are the 2 of them. Even these powerful figures who had reached the great sage level stared at the 2 of them with solemn expressions. Of course, they didn't dare to make a move at this time. After all, the power behind the 2 was far beyond their imagination. Just as everyone was turning their attention to the 2 of them, a terrifyingly loud sound came from the sky. Then an ancient warship appeared before them. Most importantly, the words Tian Shin Academy were prominently engraved on the top of the warship. In addition, the warship also exuded a fierce aura. It was like the most ferocious warship in the world. The warship slowly sailed in front of the crowd. Everyone turned their gaze toward the warship. Even the young Supreme and the fiery young Marshal were not surprised. In particular, the young Marshal Xian Yuanpa, with his eyes filled with a fighting spirit, looked at the warship. After all, he knew about the grudges between the Great Xia Empire, their Xianyuan family, and the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, he naturally wanted to see the geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. At the same time, they wanted to completely eliminate the geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. They even directly crushed the geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. Only in this way can he quell the hatred in his heart. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the warship of the Heavenly God Academy slowly came to a stop in the sky. Then, several young men slowly emerged from the warship of the Heavenly God Academy. The aura emanating from the foremost youths had all reached the Saint King realm. They exuded an air of arrogance the moment they emerged. When his gaze fell upon Xian Yuanpa and Chu Chun, a hint of anger appeared in his eyes. However, at this point, they naturally dared not lay a hand on the two of them. After all, they had heard of the two men's reputations. As these young men slowly appeared in the sky, several more young talents, exuding terrifying aura, slowly emerged from the warship of the Heavenly God Academy. One of them exuded a terrifying aura. He was wearing a long blue robe. His eyes conveyed a sense of contempt. It was as if none of the geniuses present could catch his eye. The other person was wearing a silver-white robe. A silver ribbon was tied around her head. This made her look very dashing. However, when his gaze fell upon Xian Yuanpa and the other two, a hint of murderous intent appeared in his eyes. The other person was a woman. She also exuded a very mysterious aura. A purple longsword was also hanging at his waist. She was wearing a long purple dress. She looks very charming. These three are the most outstanding geniuses of this generation from the Heavenly God Academy. However, since the Great War between the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family, no more geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy have appeared. Therefore, the group of geniuses present were quite bewildered after seeing the terrifying aura emanating from these three people. They had never heard of such a formidable prodigy in the Heavenly God Academy. As these three top geniuses released their auras, only then did everyone realize that the three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy had all reached the Great Saint realm. Of course, these three top geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy also directly placed their pressure on Xian Yuanpa and the other two. Upon seeing this scene, both Xian Yuanpa and Chu Chun instantly showed anger on their faces, especially the young Marshal Xian Yuanpa, who took a step forward and instantly released a terrifying aura. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he addressed the three top experts from the Heavenly God Academy in the sky. Does the Heavenly God Academy think that my Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire have no one left? After he finished speaking, a fiery red spear instantly appeared in his hand. On the tip of the fiery red spear, a golden dragon was prominently carved. At the same time, the terrifying aura emanating from Xianyuan Pu was also released. At this point, if these three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy didn't give him an explanation, he would definitely take action against them. What is your Xianyuan family? If you're not convinced, you can fight me. The prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, dressed in a long blue robe, scoffed after hearing Xian Yuanpa's words. At the same time, he took a step forward. The aura of a great sage was also released directly from his body. Chapter 716, The Battle of Top Prodigies begins. Chu Chin's Supreme Bone Divine Ability, the Hand of Heaven. Upon hearing the words of this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, Xian Yuanpa's face instantly contorted with anger. Then, with a hint of anger in his voice, he spoke to the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. Do you really think your Heavenly God Academy is so great? More than 10 years ago, quite a few great emperors and unorthodox Taoists perished in the Heavenly God Academy. After speaking, Xian Yuanpa put on a mocking expression. The geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy were completely enraged after hearing Xian Yuanpa's words. As the top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy, they naturally knew about the great battle that had taken place. At the same time, they also knew the number of emperor-level experts who had fallen in their Heavenly God Academy during that great battle. Moreover, in the earlier battles, a considerable number of other powerful individuals from their Heavenly God Academy also perished. Therefore, the Heavenly God Academy, the Great Xia Empire, and the Xianyuan family naturally became mortal enemies. Their original intention in coming out this time was to kill the prodigies of the Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire. However, among the prodigies of the Great Xia Empire, only this young supreme being has appeared. Therefore, the prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy naturally turned their attention to the young supreme of the Great Xia Empire and the fiery young marshal of the Xianyuan family. They were just trying to provoke the two of them into making a move prematurely. In that case, even if they kill two geniuses who rule the world, they won't say much. However, they did not expect that they would be outmaneuvered by the young marshal of the Xianyuan family. It should be noted that the young marshal of the Xianyuan family, known for his fiery temper, is perceived by many as a very volatile individual. I never expected that this young marshal of blazing fire would be so eloquent. Xianyuan Pe, you're courting death. Then, the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, dressed in a long blue robe, slowly stepped forward and spoke. After he finished speaking, a long blue spear instantly appeared in his hand. Without the slightest hesitation, he charged straight towards Xianyuan Pe. Upon seeing this scene again, a burning fighting spirit instantly appeared in Xianyuan Pe's eyes. At the same time, the fiery red spear in his hand was directly aimed at this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. Suddenly, a fiery red dragon appeared behind him. Then, carrying terrifying power, it charged towards the prodigy of the Heavenly God Academy. The prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy, seeing this scene, naturally had no worries whatsoever. Suddenly, a giant blue dragon appeared behind him. The giant blue dragon, radiating terrifying power, charged towards Xianyuan Pe. In the blink of an eye, the two giant dragons collided in the sky in an instant. The surrounding space shook violently at the moment of impact. Those so-called prodigies are constantly regressing, because at this moment, they could feel this terrifying force constantly pressing into their bodies. Therefore, they naturally dare not underestimate this terrifying power. Seeing this, Chu Fan below waved his hand towards the sky. The terrifying force then directly moved those prodigies who didn't have time to escape to a distant place. After doing all this, he slowly raised his head and looked at the other two prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy. He naturally looked down on the other geniuses in the Heavenly God Academy. The only two remaining geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy who could catch Chu Fan's eye are these two. Let's fight! The seemingly carefree and unrestrained prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, upon seeing Chu Fan's gaze, spoke directly to him, and after speaking, he exuded a terrifying aura. One person flew directly onto the sea. The aura of a great sage in his early stage was also released directly from his body. Chu Fan did not hesitate at all when he saw this scene. He transformed into a streak of silver-white light and chased after it. Without hesitation, Chu Fan threw a punch at the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. The terrifying power, carrying the surrounding terrifying laws, directly attacked the geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. Upon witnessing this scene again, the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy retreated without the slightest hesitation. At the same time, a silver-white array instantly appeared at the spot where he had just been. The silver-white array aimed to trap Chu Fan within it. But how could Chu Fan possibly be one of those simple geniuses? Therefore, his punch completely destroyed the silver-white array. Then, a silvery white light suddenly appeared on his chest. A giant silvery white hand appeared in the sky in an instant. This is precisely the divine power of the supreme bone, the hand of heaven. The terrifying, silvery white, giant hand seemed to have fallen from the celestial realm. The powerful force struck directly at the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. The prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy was instantly shocked upon seeing this scene. He hadn't expected that the young supreme being in front of him would unleash a deadly move right from the start. So he didn't hesitate and took out his weapon without any hesitation. In an instant, a long sword appeared in his hand. Without the slightest hesitation, he slashed his sword at the giant hand in the sky. The terrifying sword energy instantly filled the entire sky. Then, without any surprise, it collided with the silvery white palm in the sky. What's truly incredible is the instant this terrifying sword energy collided with the silver white palm. This awe-inspiring sword energy was gently crushed by the silver white palm. Then, the silvery white palm continued to press down on the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, carrying terrifying power. Before this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy could react, his entire body was pressed into the sea by the silver white palm. They didn't even have the ability to resist. However, although the power of the Hand of Heaven is extremely strong, this time they did not completely annihilate this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy, because this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy also flew out of the sea at this time, although he was directly pressed into the ocean by this palm. But there are no marks on his body now. Instead, she looked angrily in Chu Fan's direction. Then, in an instant, he swung his long sword. The next second, a terrifying sword aura seemed to fall from the sky. Behind this terrifying realm lies a celestial sword thousands of feet long. This immortal sword, carrying terrifying power, hurtled towards Chu Fan. Chu Fan showed no shock whatsoever when he saw this scene again. Instead, a silvery white light instantly appeared on his body. At the same time, a silver white spear instantly appeared in his hand. The next second, the silver white spear in his hand exuded a terrifying aura. A giant silver dragon instantly appeared behind him. Then, carrying terrifying power, it charged towards the giant sword in the sky. Chapter 717, Chu Yanran's appearance shocked all the geniuses present. As these two terrifying forces collided, the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy also endured immense power. He was blasted away by this terrifying force. Chu Chun, on the other hand, stood calmly in place. The spear in his hand was still trembling. It was as if they had encountered a real enemy. Chu Chun, on the other hand, calmly watched the prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy fly backwards in front of him. On the other side, another prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy also wore a solemn expression upon seeing this scene. Without hesitation, she charged directly towards Chu Chun. She also carried a terrifying aura. Of course, the most important thing is that this purple aura instantly dyed the entire sky purple. Chu Chun naturally noticed this last top genius of the Heavenly God Academy. Then, he immediately fixed his gaze on the woman. Upon seeing this, the woman drew her long sword from her waist without hesitation. A terrifying purple sword aura instantly pressed down from the sky. Chu Chun didn't show much expression when he saw this scene. Instead, he wanted to use the spear in his hand to block the terrifying sword energy. However, at that moment, Chu Chun suddenly sensed an even more terrifying aura coming from the sky. Then, he immediately turned his gaze to the sky. Then, a fiery red sword aura suddenly appeared in the sky. The fiery red sword energy instantly blocked the purple sword energy. At the same time, a stunningly beautiful woman dressed in a fiery red robe instantly appeared in everyone's sight. The stunningly beautiful woman doesn't look very old. However, the long robe she wore clearly indicated that she was of noble status. At the same time, this stunningly beautiful woman was also holding a fiery red immortal sword. It looks incredibly powerful. Yanran greets Uncle Wang. This stunningly beautiful woman was none other than Princess Chu Yanran of the Great Xia Empire. At this moment, she slowly turned her head to look at Chu Chun and spoke. After she finished speaking, she looked at the woman from the Heavenly God Academy in front of her with a cold gaze. As the current Jinbei king of the Great Empire, Chu Chun is naturally the uncle of Chu Yanran and Chu Wushuang. Yanran, what brings you here? Chu Chun was somewhat surprised to see Chu Yanran in front of him, even though he knew that his niece's talent and strength far surpassed his own. However, he did not expect that his niece would also appear here. This moment surprised him. After all, his niece had never appeared in Chang'an City, so he was naturally quite surprised when Chu Yanran came here. My brother plans to go out and gain experience, so Yanran naturally chose to do the same. Chu Yanran then cupped her hands in greeting to Chu Chun once more. After she finished speaking, the fiery red sword in her hand instantly emitted a terrifying sword aura. Then, engulfed in terrifying flames, he charged towards the woman from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. Everyone from the Heavenly God Academy deserves to die. At the same time, her voice was also very cold and clear, reaching the entire battlefield. This made everyone present clearly hear the coldness in Chu Yanran's tone. Who are you in the Great Xia Empire? The woman from the Heavenly God Academy looked at Chu Yanran with great surprise after hearing her words and asked her a question. Of course, at this point, she did not choose to remain still in the same position as at the beginning. Instead, she was seen gripping the purple sword tightly in her hand. The terrifying sword energy emanating from his body was also immediately released. Chu Yanran of the Great Xia Empire, daughter of the current human emperor. After hearing her words, Chu Yanran said arrogantly. At the same time, her sword energy collided directly with the sword energy of the woman from the Heavenly God Academy in front of her. Chu Yanran's strength had already reached the mid-stage of the Great Sage Realm. This is because Chu Yanran is not under as much pressure as Chu Wushuang. Therefore, Chu Yanran's current strength is naturally not as great as Chu Wushuang's. However, the gap between her and Chu Wushuang is not that large. After all, their physical constitutions were what they were. Therefore, the sword aura emanating from her body was naturally extremely terrifying. The woman from the Heavenly God Academy is also quite strong. He also reached the early stage of the Great Sage Realm. However, in the battle with Chu Yanran, she was at a disadvantage in just a few moves. After Chu Yanran and the woman from the Heavenly God Academy engaged in a fierce battle, everyone present turned their attention to the two of them. After all, both of them were peerless beauties. Therefore, their battle naturally attracted the attention of everyone present. At this moment, Xian Yuanpa, who was engaged in a fierce battle with the top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy, also looked at Chu Yanran with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Is she Chu Yanran, the daughter of the human emperor? I heard that her talent is terrifying, and now it seems that it is indeed true. Then Xian Yuanpa muttered to himself, a strange look in his eyes. Now, she also wanted to see just how powerful the daughter of the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire really was. As the young marshal of the Fiery Army, he once wanted to join the Great Xia Empire. However, his ancestor from a Xinyuan family had told him that to join the Great Xia Empire, he had to become an emperor. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let him join the Great Xia Empire. That's why he's training so hard now. He wanted to join the Great Xia Empire and serve his idol. He was naturally very excited to see his idol's daughter. Meanwhile, Chu Chen on the other side shook his head. He hadn't expected Chu Yinran to come here. However, from Chu Yinran's words just now, he could also tell that Chu Wushuang should also be here. Thinking about this, he also became somewhat curious. However, he is currently engaged in a fierce battle with this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. After all, his strength was already formidable. Therefore, he also had the upper hand in the battle against this prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy. The other prodigies present also overheard the conversation between Chu Yinran and Chu Chun, so they had some guesses in their minds. The war god in the Temple of War looked at Chu Yinran with a hint of doubt in his eyes. The daughter of the current emperor, I never expected that such a terrifying genius was hidden in the Great Xia Empire. Then, he looked in Chu Yinran's direction and spoke slowly, his eyes filled with a hint of resentment. The princes and princesses of the Great Xia Empire should be only 17 or 18 years old now. I didn't expect their strength to have reached such a terrifying level. It seems that their talents are not as simple as we imagined. At this moment, Long Zhantian, who was beside him, also slowly spoke up, while trying to figure out just how strong the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire had become. Although they have always been paying attention to the Great Xia Empire. However, there is not much information about the eldest prince and princess of the Great Xia Empire. After all, they were all beings protected in the deepest recesses of the Great Xia Empire.